Chapter 1160. At 1439 in the afternoon, outside the 100 cities of the Federation, in the vast and boundless peace circle, a majestic army swept over like a torrent of steel. It was the Imperial Border Guards who were fully armed. They were dressed as knights and rode on war horses bred by the Imperial demonic beasts. In the sky behind the army, a large number of fighter jets and steam-powered airships flew in the sky like locusts, pushing all kinds of federal military weapons seized from the first line of defense. Naturally, there were a large number of captives who had already obeyed the Empire and activated the weapons for the Empire. Although the Empire mainly developed genetic power, its level of technology was not low. Its research on biological genes was hundreds of years more advanced than the Federation's, and its other aspects of technology were close to the level of the Third Industrial Revolution of the Old Era. In the middle of the army, a large number of generals accompanied four stalwart figures. These four people were vaguely led by a slender and graceful woman, and the three behind her were also extraordinary. However, standing on the far left was a young man wearing a blood-red robe and silver-riveted gloves. His face was pale, like a vampire in an ancient castle. His eyes were sunken, and he gave off a somewhat sickly feeling. If Dean was here, he would recognize that this was the Blood-Thorn Emperor who had been penetrated and destroyed by the Super Raytheon cannon. The main army has entered the peace circle of the Troll Federation. Half a step behind Crimson Moon was the Light King, dressed in a white robe like a priest. As he spoke, his eyes swept over the back of the beautiful figure in front of him. His gaze could even see the fine hair on the back of her neck, and a trace of light flashed in his eyes. Crimson Moon looked ahead with a thoughtful expression. After a moment, she said, "The Demon Emperor said that the Federation's peace circle is buried with a large number of traps. It is the second line of defense of the Troll Federation, and also the most terrifying line of defense. Although no one will come out to stop us after we enter the peace circle, it will be convenient for the Troll Federation to activate their world-destroying weapons and wipe us out in one fell swoop. I think we can split into two groups." A young man on the far right, with a devilishly handsome face and two long and narrow dark golden eyes on his cheekbones, suggested. His voice was neither a man nor a woman, but it seemed to have a strange charm. Split into two groups. On the other side, the Blood-Thorn Sovereign King frowned, his pale face slightly gloomy. "I attracted the firepower earlier and was heavily injured by that thing. I need to recuperate for the time being. Don't expect me to appear again." The bewitching youth glanced at him. Thinking back to that destructive lightning, his eyes flashed with a trace of coldness. He knew that if it was him, he would definitely die if he was struck by that thing. However, the Blood-Thorn Sovereign King managed to survive. It could be seen that the Blood-Thorn Sovereign King's survival ability was much stronger than his. No need to separate. Crimson Moon opened her mouth, her voice indifferent and filled with unquestionable majesty. "The enemy has more than one world-destroying weapon. If we split up, we will only suffer a greater blow. If we stay together, we can still resist together. The key is that this place called the Peace Circle is not peaceful at all. Most of the traps inside are not a threat to us, but there's a weapon that can hurt us." The gazes of the three king tiers froze as they looked at her in astonishment. For her to think so, it was most likely true. When they thought of the abilities this Queen of Darkness was proficient in, their expressions became even more serious. The scientific name of this weapon is rather long. It's called the Life Extermination Ring. Once it's activated, all living things in this area will be exterminated. No matter how high or low one's physique is, it will be difficult to resist. Crimson Moon said slowly. She had found this information from the heads of the highest commanders of the first line of defense. No matter how high or low one's physique is. The Blood-Thorn Sovereign King's expression changed slightly. "Isn't that even more powerful than their world-destroying weapon? Can't we resist it?" Crimson Moon shook her head and said, "The attack of this thing isn't physical. It can only be resisted by the strength of one's body. Instead, it directly acts on a magnetic field of one's life. You can think of it as a soul weapon. It could directly attack your soul and scatter it. Even if you can split your body, you won't be able to resist it. In terms of lethality, it is indeed more powerful than the world-destroying weapon. The three king tiers looked at each other. They didn't expect the Troll Federation to have such a terrifying thing. So you're saying that we have to return empty-handed? The Demon Eye King frowned and glanced at Crimson Moon. He felt that since she was so calm, she must have some other ideas. The Light King, who was standing behind Crimson Moon, had a smile on his face like a benevolent priest. However, his eyes swept across the sky in the distance. A glimmer of light flashed in his eyes, but he didn't say anything. Return empty-handed? Crimson Moon seemed to have her joke. She sneered and said, "Why would I give up halfway? Although this ring of life extinguishing is terrifying, its range is limited. The fact that it is called a ring has already exposed its flaw. Since it is a ring, it is one-sided. We can pass through it from the sky or from underground. There are many ways." The Demon Eye King was startled. He patted his head and laughed bitterly. Although he looked like a teenager, his actions and expression made him seem somewhat mature. The Bloodthorn Sovereign's furrowed brows relaxed. With a cold expression, he said, "I'm afraid it will be risky to have all the troops sneak in from the sky or underground. I have two suggestions. The first is to use the Abyss as the leader and split up the army. We will use guerrilla warfare to flank the enemy from all directions. The enemy's world-destroying weapons will basically be ineffective. The traps on the ground can also be blocked by the Abyss. Then we can sneak in from the sky. The second method is to have the main army continue to advance. We will bring a group of elites and sneak in from the sky. Let the main army move slowly. When the enemy's attention is on the main army, we will have already sneaked into the Troll Federation. Even if the enemy uses world-destroying weapons to attack the main army, it won't matter. As long as we win in the end, these Troll Federation's lowly citizens can all be used as soldiers." The Demon Eye King nodded. "I think so too." The Light King smiled as if he didn't hear it. He didn't agree or deny it. Crimson Moon already had an idea. She said, "Let the main army continue to advance. Then, split a few groups of Abyss soldiers to lead the smaller groups to flank and attract the enemy's attention. The rest will follow me and sneak in from the sky." The Bloodthorn Monarch asked, "Why not underground? Every city in the Troll Federation has world-destroying weapons buried under the ground. They have the most advanced sensing systems. Once they detect us, they will activate the world-destroying weapons and sacrifice a city. It will be enough to bury us all." Crimson Moon said coldly. The Bloodthorn Monarch's pupils shrank slightly. He didn't say anything else. Soon, the plan was given and executed immediately. A moment later, Crimson Moon and the other three kings led a group of Abyss Masters and Abyss Elites into the sky and disappeared. Outside of the Federation's Copper Ship City, a group of mecha operators who had escaped from the first defense line rushed over. Hundreds of mechas landed on the carrier's giant receiving platform. A group of mecha operators got off in a hurry and quickly retreated to the city passage. "Majin, why aren't you running?" "I sprained my ankle." "You go first, I'll be right there." Another person was about to help him, but suddenly there was a tremor at the end of the plane outside the receiving platform. Mecha operators' vision and hearing were much sharper than ordinary people's. They could vaguely see the sky turning dark. The man's expression changed. He immediately turned around and ran without looking back, rushing into the city passage with the crowd. Majin, who stayed where he was, turned around and looked. His eyes flashed, and he rushed to a corner of the receiving platform while no one was paying attention. Although this place was outside the city's protective shield, it was not within the range of the Ring of Life and Elimination. He glanced at the Imperial main army coming from the end of the plane and narrowed his eyes slightly. He didn't expect them to directly rush into the peace circle. Chapter 1161. There are protective shields and detection systems over the 100 cities of the Federation. Their traces will soon be discovered. But compared to the Ring of Life, this energy shield is nothing. Dean turned his head and looked at the rear of Bronze Ship City. It was the hinterland of the Federation. He should have expected such a situation. With his wisdom and computing ability, what kind of trap will he arrange to receive them? He was looking forward to it. He wouldn't intervene in the war between the Empire and the Federation. Lin Chongsheng and Crimson Moon's death would be a great revenge for him. If Crimson Moon and the others appeared in the main city of the Federation and went deep into the hinterland of the Federation, it would show that the attack was not a bluff. The Empire wouldn't dare to risk the lives of the four kings. Once Crimson Moon and the other three kings died, the strength of the Empire would be greatly weakened. It would arouse the covetous eyes of the Federation and the Fire Dragon country. Therefore, the two sides would fight to the end. Dean wouldn't make a move even if all four kings were killed. He believed that the Demon Emperor wouldn't let such a situation happen. Maybe it wasn't just the four kings who came. The Demon Emperor might also appear on the battlefield, but no one noticed him. More than 10 minutes later, the Imperial Legion entered the depths of the Peace Circle. At the same time, in the Warhammer Citadel of Bronze Ship City and the other 12 frontier cities, several loud noises burst out. Intercontinental missile-like lights and shadows flew out, dragging long trails of air. Near the Peace Circle that the Imperial Legion entered, the ground burst open. The continuous explosions formed a huge mushroom cloud that completely engulfed the Imperial Legion. At the moment of the explosion, an invisible shockwave shook out from the ground outside a border city along the route of the Imperial Army, like a wave sweeping across the plains. The green grass swayed like a breeze, but wherever this breeze passed, the bodies of the poisonous snakes, stone scorpions, and other small monsters hidden in the grass all stiffened and stopped moving. Even some of the wandering corpses also became sluggish, but only for a moment before continuing to wander. The traps of the Circle of Peace, the attacks of the 12 border cities, and the ring of life and death hidden in the depths of the Circle of Peace were activated at the same time. These concentrated attacks were enough to wipe out a large beast tide in an instant. However, in an inconspicuous city behind the 12 border cities, a giant cannon suddenly ejected from it and shot into the place where the Imperial Army was attacked, landing in the dust. Boom! The next moment, the entire sky seemed to light up slightly. Immediately after, a deafening roar rang out, spreading across more than half of the Federation. Not long after, a mushroom cloud that looked like a volcanic eruption appeared and rapidly spread in all directions. The air was also quickly swept away, and a scorching heat wave swept through the surroundings like a storm. If an ordinary person were to stare at this place, just the scorching light from the explosion would be enough to blind them. The mayor of the 12 border cities, who was also the Minister of Defense of the Federation, looked at the sight of the explosion nervously, waiting for the feedback data and filtered images from the detection system. Tens of thousands of meters up in the sky, invisible to the naked eye, a group of figures appeared. A violent sound rang out from the ground, causing everyone's pupils to shrink slightly. Even though they knew about the Troll Demon Federation's world-destroying weapon, they had never seen it before. At this moment, just hearing this earth-shattering sound caused their hearts to palpitate. If they were in the center of this sound, even Fei Yu and the others were not confident that they could survive. This is the world-destroying weapon that destroyed the old era. Fei Yu's eyes flickered slightly. There was some fear in them, but there was more of a strange light in them. The Bloodthorn Sovereign's pale face became even paler. This sound seemed to have awakened the fear that was sealed in the depths of his memory, giving him an impulse to turn around and escape. At the same time, a series of earth-shattering and terrifying images appeared in his mind. It was not just a world-destroying weapon, but many all over the world. The Radiant King and Demon Eye King's expressions were not good. The most terrifying thing in the depths of their memory had been evoked. While they were afraid, they could not help but have a strong killing intent towards the huge Federation below them. It was a thought that they must destroy it. Get ready, kill. After Fei Yu came back to her senses, a cold light flashed in her eyes. With a low shout, she took the lead and dived down. Her body flickered, like a phantom shuttling between reality and illusion, appearing and disappearing. It was difficult to catch. The rest of the people followed her and dived down. Like a sharp cone, their target was one of the cities. Looking from the sky, the layout of the 100 cities of the Federation was very obvious. There were 12 border cities on the periphery. Inside the border cities were ordinary cities. Inside were the 4 main cities, and in the center of the 4 main cities was the main city of the Federation, which was also the place where the Federation president and members of parliament lived. The explosion was not only the signal of the destruction of the Imperial Army, but also the bugle call for Fei Yu and others to start the war. Dean saw that the Imperial Army was swept away by the nuclear bomb and the Ring of Annihilation, so he no longer paid attention to it. He restored his original appearance and soared into the sky. He flew out of the energy shield of Copper Ship City and went straight to the direction of the main city of the Federation. Soon, Dean saw a heat source emerging in the sky. These heat sources were extremely shocking, and there were a lot of them. There were 40 to 50 of them, and the lowest one was an abyssal-level heat source. Sure enough, they are attacking the main city of the Federation. Dean slightly narrowed his eyes. It seemed that Fei Yu did not know about the existence of Lin Changsheng, which meant that the Demon Emperor did not tell her about this. Otherwise, she would not have taken the risk to go deep into the hinterland and attack a puppet like the Federation president. Thinking of this, his heart suddenly shivered. If he was the Demon Emperor, what would he do at this moment? The host city. Dean suddenly realized that the Demon Emperor had already sneaked into the Federation and was squatting in the host city. Let Fei Yu attack the main city of the Federation to attract the attention of the Federation. After the Federation president and members of parliament were killed, the 4 consortiums would split up. At this time, in order to avoid losses, Lin Changsheng had to stand up to preside over the overall situation and expose himself. Perhaps he would use the second puppet, which was the Terrace Consortium. The Demon Emperor wants Fei Yu to force him out so that he can send a mechanical army to deal with Fei Yu, and then wait for the opportunity to sneak into the host city and destroy Lin Changsheng. Thinking of this speculation, Dean's face became a little strange. He had to say that from the perspective of the Demon Emperor, this method was good, and it was likely to make Lin Changsheng suffer a setback. However, the Demon Emperor did not know of his existence. But Lin Changsheng would not forget him. The more chaotic the situation was, the more vigilant he would be, and he would always be on guard against Lin Changsheng's attack on the host city. If he thinks that the Demon Emperor is me, then the Demon Emperor will be bloody unlucky. Dean muttered to himself. Suddenly, he thought of another thing. If Lin Changsheng did not know that the Demon Emperor had sneaked into the Federation and was wholeheartedly dealing with Dean, then he would inevitably set up a trap to lure Dean to attack. At this time, the first to lose control would be the Demon Emperor who was waiting in the dark, and he would become Dean's scapegoat and fall into Lin Changsheng's trap. It was no wonder that the Demon Emperor was not cautious enough, only that he did not understand the situation. Chapter 1162. At this moment, Crimson Moon and the other 3 kings descended from the sky with many abyssals. In less than 4 or 5 seconds, they appeared in the sky above the federal main city like meteorites. Their momentum was terrifying and immediately attracted the attention of the federal main city. The city defense department was in chaos. Countless people were like ants on a hot pan as loud alarms sounded on the skyscrapers and streets of the city. Everyone who was working, leisurely drinking tea, or shopping was shocked by the sound of the alarms. This kind of city defense alarm would be performed once a year. Each time it was performed, it would be announced in the news in advance with a set date. However, this time, it was outside of the set date without any warning. All the citizens were stunned for a few seconds before they suddenly panicked and rushed toward the emergency entrances in the buildings into the underground tunnels. These tunnels and escape methods have been seen countless times in the show. Even a 7 or 8-year-old child knew this. The time was too short. Crimson Moon and the others appeared in the sky above the federal main city like ghosts. Without giving the city defense department time to react, they crashed into the electric grid energy shield of the federal main city. With Crimson Moon in the lead, they tore a huge hole in the energy shield. Crimson Moon's body was filled with electricity, repelling the electricity on the energy shield and creating a gap. The others quickly passed through the gap. After entering the energy shield, the huge federal main city was under everyone's feet. Dozens of Abyssals and 4 kings looked down at the city with a style that was completely different from the Empire. The next moment, they swooped down like death gods. Crimson Moon and the other 3 kings went straight to the federal government in the center of the city. The rest of the Abyssals flew toward the Congress and other places. Some even pounced on some tall buildings. With a casual blow, they shook the steel-like buildings to the point of collapse. The federal main city was shrouded in wailing. The Abyssals destroyed and slaughtered everywhere in the city. Some news agencies had just captured the buildings being destroyed by the Abyssals, and the cameras and a few brave reporters were crushed into meat paste. All of this was broadcast to other cities. Countless people were frightened. They didn't expect the Abyssals to be so cruel. Some children and women were so scared that they started crying. At this time, the city defense department mobilized the creator god mechs and a few other types of 5-star mechs. Some of them were auxiliary mechs that were responsible for stabilizing the city. They were not good at fighting, but they were very good at cleaning up the battlefield. There were also mechs that were responsible for transportation, sending some refugees to the shelter. Wherever the abyss swept through, it was a complete mess. Crimson Moon and the other kings charged into the government. Crimson Moon quickly found the president of the Federation after reading his memories. They captured him and searched through his memories. Only then did they realize that the president of the Federation was just a puppet. The real manipulator behind him was the person in charge of the Terrace Financial Group, Jasaloti. After learning this information, Crimson Moon's face darkened. However, she did not kill the puppet chairman in a fit of rage. Instead, she used the Federation government's news platform to broadcast this scene live to every city in the Federation. She also used the highest authority to take over all other information platforms. At this moment, all the citizens of the Federation, even those young men and women who did not care about the survival of the Federation and only knew how to have fun, saw this scene from their favorite entertainment devices. No matter how they tried, they could not turn off this scene. They could only watch this boring scene with indignation. In front of the camera, Crimson Moon and the 3 kings stood with cold expressions. They were tall and straight, their temperaments cold and arrogant. They all had the appearance of humans, and according to human aesthetics, they were all handsome men and beautiful women. Many women screamed when they saw the handsome youth Demon Eye King and the cold and aloof Blood Thorn Emperor. Their eyes flashed, unwilling to believe that they were those cruel, bloodthirsty, and even man-eating demons. They even felt that even if they were really demons, they must have had their own reasons for eating humans. Crimson Moon was holding the Federation chairman in her hand, and her slender, snow-white hand was holding the fat chairman. The contrast was stark. The originally dignified chairman was now like a thin and weak chick without any dignity. Many of the older generation could not believe it and were extremely disappointed. At the same time, they were extremely angry and resentful towards the demon race. However, more young people were extremely curious about Crimson Moon, Bloodthorn Emperor, and the others. At the same time, they also expressed disdain and ridicule towards the powerless Federation chairman. Crimson Moon held the Federation chairman hostage and ordered every city to open the city gates wide, allowing their large army to enter. She also promised many things, such as that they were not demons, that the citizens were deceived by the higher-ups of the Federation, that they had their own reasons for coming here, that they were once of the same race and were expelled by those who had power, and so on. Her words were so sincere that many citizens were shocked. It was as if they had seen a brand new face, and many people believed her on the spot. Crimson Moon had read the memories of the Federation chairman and some officials, as well as the memories of ordinary people and low-level soldiers. Naturally, she knew what kind of impression the Empire had in the minds of the people at all stages of the Federation. Her words were all critical, including the grievances in the hearts of many citizens. Her words quickly turned into another kind of truth, contending with the original justice. Dean looked at the broadcast on his wristwatch. He couldn't help but shake his head and smile when he heard Crimson Moon's words. At this moment, Lin Changsheng was probably going to vomit blood. Even if they completely expelled the demons this time, it would be difficult to explain to the citizens of the Federation. Crimson Moon's words were like a seed that had been planted. Lin Changsheng could only use an iron fist to suppress it and include it in the criminal law. Perhaps it would slowly fade after a decade or so. It's a pity that there is a demon emperor. Otherwise, she would have become an emperor. Dean thought in his heart. If Crimson Moon held the Federation chairman hostage and directly ordered the legions of the cities to stop, it would instead arouse the blood of the citizens of the Federation. But at this moment, she was using the so-called truth to divide the citizens of the Federation. Many soldiers would even be affected. Even if the battle was lost, it would cultivate a group of spies. Although this seemed not domineering and arrogant enough, but it was far more useful than arrogant words to let the enemy tear a large piece of meat. Dean turned off the wristwatch and put it into the bag. He turned around and continued to rush in the direction of the host city. Although this wristwatch was a Federation item, but if it was simply used, even if Lin Changsheng could appear in any intelligent device of the Federation, he wouldn't know that he was using this wristwatch. After all, it was impossible for him to integrate his consciousness into the host and disperse it to countless devices to monitor everyone who used the device. This would only weaken his own consciousness. In the end, he might even completely lose his own will and turn into a program of the Federation's intelligent host. He might even be erased as an abnormal program. Chapter 1163. Dean looked at the host city for a moment. He turned into a dark shadow and lurked close to the ground. There are detection systems in the sky and underground. Many plants on the ground have been modified with tiny detectors. Dean narrowed his eyes slightly. His dark golden pupils scanned the grass in front of him. He saw that in the middle of the verdant grass, there were many stems embedded with toothpick-sized metal bars. They were very soft. Even if the weeds were trampled on, they wouldn't damage the metal detector inside. Only Lin Changsheng knew about this detector. He used his mechanical legion to secretly set it up to guard against the people of the Federation. This was his lair, his heart. If it was anyone else hiding here, no matter how careful they were, they would turn into a shadow, shrink into a poisonous snake, burrow into the ground, and so on. They would all be seen by Lin Changsheng. With Lin Changsheng's huge computing power, no matter how the human camouflaged, he would be able to speculate the flaws in a second. However, Dean knew about Lin Changsheng's memory, so he was prepared. The detector had a radius of about 50 meters. Moreover, the angle of the detector on each grass was different. As a result, there was no dead angle at all. But it wasn't a problem for him. He could create a dead angle. A pair of shadow wings extended from the back of the shadow that he had transformed into. They were like two giant palms, waving forward in a seemingly slow, but actually extremely fast manner. It was as if all the air within a dozen cubic meters had been pushed out, setting off a gentle gust of wind that slowly drifted dozens of meters away, bending the grass where the detector was buried. At the same time, his body quickly moved closer. When the gentle wind stopped, he was already more than 10 centimeters below the grass. His body was submerged in the soil, and he turned into a pangolin-like shadow. With his current genetic editing ability, he could write a strange, breathing organ that could absorb oxygen even in the soil. Lin Changsheng is on guard against me. He calculated that I have part of his memory and know about the traps outside the host city. He might try to avoid these traps. It stands to reason that there are other ways to avoid these traps. But with Lin Changsheng's wisdom and the computing power of the host city, he should be able to think of 7 or 8 countermeasures and set up a tighter defense in other places. I'll do the opposite. This path is the safest. However, it is also possible that he has calculated this and has done the exact opposite. He kept the original arrangements at the periphery so that I would lower my vigilance but when we were deep inside, he did something even more ruthless. Dean was lying on the ground, calculating in his mind. Although his calculation ability couldn't compare to Lin Chongqing's, he could slowly sort out his thoughts. He wasn't in a hurry. The speed of his thoughts didn't affect the accuracy of the results. In this game, he and Lin Chongqing were not the only ones on the chessboard. There was also an unknown moving chess piece, the Demon Emperor. However, the unknown here was only to him. Perhaps the Demon Emperor had long since entered Lin Chongqing's line of sight and was being treated as a game partner by Lin Chongqing. I interfered in the collapse of the first line of defense. Perhaps Lin Chongqing will realize my goal. If that's the case, the Demon Emperor might not be mistaken for me. Dean slowly frowned. He felt that he had acted recklessly before. He shouldn't have intervened in the border war. Based on his understanding of Lin Chongqing, the latter had the ability to calculate the detailed results of the war, including the specific number of casualties and the process and time of the collapse. Although the battlefield was changing rapidly, but Lin Chongqing's calculation ability was too strong. 1 minute of thinking was equivalent to 100 years of thinking. It was enough to calculate the complete situation of the battlefield. However, because of Dean's intervention, the situation of the battlefield was different from Lin Chongqing's calculation. Lin Chongqing would be aware of the heresy and thus guess Dean's purpose. When the game reached the extreme, both sides were basically open cards. Using open cards to confront each other relied on instantaneous changes and judgment. It wasn't like pulling out hidden cards and turning them into killer moves. The worst-case scenario is that Lin Chongqing knows that there are 3 people on the chessboard and has deduced our position. That Demon Emperor also knows of my existence through other means. Everyone has about the same amount of information, and my advantage is gone. Dean was a little worried. Although he knew that this was the worst speculation, he had to prepare for the worst. If I were the Demon Overlord, I might have lurked in the host city a long time ago instead of sneaking in during this sensitive period of war. All the people who enter the host city during this time will be included in the suspect list by Lin Chongqing and closely monitored. Every corner of the city is his eyes. Dean's eyes flashed. Even if the Demon Emperor knows about my existence and knows that someone is waiting for the Oriole behind, there is no way to continue lurking. The war has broken out, and Crimson Moon has made a move. The opportunity has appeared, and I can't miss it. I just need to wait behind him. However, he may not be willing to let others pick the peach. He will have other arrangements. If I were him, I would make a move now and retreat in defeat. Boom! As Dean was thinking, there was a sudden violent sound. The ground shook and the surrounding grass trembled. Dean's eyes turned golden. Through his eyelids and the soil, he saw the host city in the distance. There was thick black smoke coming out of it. After the loud noise, there was a sudden burst of crackling sound. It seemed that there was a riot in the city. After a while, he seemed to have made a decision. He extended a little shadow, turned it into a small palm, and fanned out a breeze, bending the tender grass implanted with detectors nearby, clearing a blind spot. Then he climbed out of the mud, waved a bigger wind, and rushed forward quickly, avoiding all the detectors in the tender grass, as well as some mechanical snakes and mechanical bugs active in the tender grass. A few minutes later, Dean appeared in the host city. He was familiar with the road and avoided Lin Chongqing's arrangements. When he was about to enter the city, an alarm suddenly sounded around him. The patrolling mechanical soldiers quickly heard the alarm and came over. Countless machine gun fingers pointed at him and issued a humanistic warning. But before the warning was finished, it seemed that something interrupted them and they opened fire. Dean knew that Lin Chongqing had seen this scene through them and forcibly controlled the mechanical soldiers. Moreover, as he had guessed before, he avoided the traps according to Lin Chongqing's memory. He didn't expect to trigger the alarm in the end. It could be seen that this place was well prepared. Whoosh! Whoosh! As soon as the machine gun opened, Dean suddenly felt a sense of danger. This ordinary machine gun made him feel a sense of death. His scalp exploded, and he instantly burst out at full speed. At the same time, a large number of sharp blades emerged from his body. The blades on his body shook like scales and flew out, shooting towards the many mechanical soldiers. Chapter 1164. After dodging the first round of strafing from the mechanical soldiers, Dean saw that the bullets discharged from their machine guns hit the ground, leaving only deep bullet holes. It was not the lasers he had imagined. He frowned slightly, turned around, and shook out a large number of sharp blades again. Like falling leaves, they swept out, and soon the team of mechanical soldiers were cut into pieces of metal, scattering all over the ground. At this time, Duddian skimmed over and came to the front of a robot soldier. He picked up the gun in its hand and skillfully disassembled it. He took out the clip inside. The bullet in the clip was no different from the ordinary alloy bullet. He pinched the bullet with his fingers and broke it. A transparent egg-white mucus flowed out from the bullet head. Dean carefully observed the transparent mucus with his X-ray vision. Suddenly, his pupils shrank as he recognized the true face of this thing. Virus. To be precise, this should be more powerful than the virus secreted from the fangs of ordinary undead. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was the original virus. No wonder he suddenly felt a sense of horror. Once hit by this virus, even if it was just a scratch, he would be infected. Then his genes would go berserk, and he would become an unconscious undead. Looking at the scattered mechanical soldiers, Dean's face was cold. Lin Changsheng did not change the layout of the periphery, but the detection system was buried in the gap. The machine guns of this team of ordinary mechanical soldiers were equipped with the unsolvable undead virus. If he was a little careless, he would die here. No mechanical soldiers made of high-strength alloys are lying in ambush here. They know that with my ability, even intelligent machines, like the Creator's mecha, may not be able to keep me. Instead, they use the most ordinary mechanical soldiers equipped with seemingly ordinary firearms. But the interior of the firearms is modified with special texture. The power of the warhead is higher than armor-piercing bullets. It is enough to hurt me, Humph. Dean wanted to understand Lin Changsheng's plan. His eyes were cold. Suddenly, he thought another thing. Why would Lin Changsheng use the unsolvable undead virus to seize his body? Thinking of this, his body suddenly trembled, and his eyes showed uncontrollable excitement. Although he got Lin Changsheng's memory, it was only a part of the memory. It was incomplete, so he couldn't really know whether Lin Changsheng had mastered the way to solve the undead virus. Lin Changsheng used the unsolvable undead virus to attack him at the moment. Either he didn't care about his body and wanted to kill him, either that, or Lin Changsheng had the antidote in his hands. No matter how one looked at it, the possibility of the latter was far greater than the strong. Although Lin Changsheng had suffered a loss at his hands, he was still someone who had lived for more than 200 years. He would not be angered by these losses and disregard the consequences. Dean thought of Aisha when he thought of the antidote. He had studied in the Randy Company for a long time. He had read a lot of medical experiment data of the Federation. He knew that it was almost impossible to develop an antidote by himself. Even if it was developed, it would take decades or even hundreds of years. Who knew what would happen to Aisha at that time? Who knows if the developed antidote can restore the undead that have been infected for hundreds of years? He couldn't believe it himself. He didn't even dare to imagine it. And before his eyes, hope once again appeared. Dean took a deep breath as he saw several teams of soldiers rushing towards him. He knew that it was Lin Changsheng who had mobilized them. Lin Changsheng was aware that he was sending special robots to this place. He did not stop and quickly rushed into the city, shaking off those mechanical soldiers. Along the way, his body rapidly changed, constantly changing his appearance. He magnified his X-ray vision to the extreme and searched for the residential areas in the city. Only by mixing into the crowd could he escape Lin Changsheng's surveillance. Boom, boom. There was a huge vibration in the distance. Dean suddenly saw 7 or 8 creators' mecha in the sky. They formed a triangle shape. There was an energy bar between each mecha. It seemed that the energy of all the mecha was shared. Dean faintly felt the threat. He sighed in his heart. This place was worthy of being the base camp of Lin Changsheng for more than 200 years. The hidden power was beyond the knowledge of the Federation. However, he knew a little bit about the situation here through Lin Chongqing's memory. At the moment, he quickly got rid of the mechanical soldiers. He crossed the plains of the city, passed through some towns, and came to a city with human residents. His body rapidly transformed. He controlled every inch of his skin and changed his appearance. If he wanted to, he could even change the color of his hair. Ever since he had seen the Bloodthorn Monarch's violent demonization, his understanding of genes had reached a whole new level. During this period, he had also absorbed many magic marks. His demonization control had become even smoother, and he could change the shape of his body at will. Dean sneaked into the human city. At the moment, the city was in a panic. A large number of people were accompanied by mechanical guards into the shelters. Dean also sneaked into one of the shelters. He saw many people took out their wristwatches and read the news, trying to understand the situation outside. Some people were so excited that they took pictures and posted them in their virtual space. Dean took advantage of the crowd and knocked out a beautiful woman next to him. The latter's body softened and fell into his arms. He hugged her and put her arm around his neck. Like a worried little girl, she buried her head in his arms. He took off her watch and put it on his hand. He read the news on the watch while speaking in a gentle voice. The outbreak in the host city was quickly broadcasted to other cities. Although Crimson Moon had held the president of the Federation hostage and occupied the official government platform, there were many private media that could release other news. For example, at this moment, the attack on the host city was also released by the local media. It attracted the attention of other cities and made the atmosphere even more tense. Dean saw the battle outside from the pictures. A dense mechanical army poured into the city and completely occupied the streets. The sky was full of mechas like locusts. These mechas could fly for a short period of time. Amidst the heavy encirclement, a figure dressed in a black robe stood in the sky as if he was walking on flat ground. He was killing his way through the mechas quickly. His head was covered by a hood, and his face could not be seen clearly. However, with a casual strike, a mecha would be destroyed. From the looks of the destroyed mechas, they were all 4-star mechas. Among them, there were many 5-star mechas that were also destroyed. Dean's eyes slightly narrowed. Is this the Demon Emperor? In terms of strength, he was indeed stronger than ordinary kings. Even he couldn't tear a 4-star mecha with a casual punch. After all, 4-star mechas were already comparable to the Lord of the Abyss. In terms of performance, they were close to kings. It was just that they couldn't fully display their excellent performance. If the Demon Emperor has appeared, why haven't the other 4 kings appeared? Dean frowned slightly. He felt that something was wrong. At this moment, a video was suddenly released in the news. He immediately clicked on it and saw a fierce battle. Several Genesis god mechas that shared energy joined hands to attack the Black-Robed Man, but they were beaten back by the Black-Robed Man. They were moving very fast. The video was very blurry. Ordinary people couldn't see it clearly. However, Dean could see that although the Black-Robed Man was aggressive, he didn't seem to be as strong as he imagined. This is not the Demon Emperor. Dean came to this conclusion. Suddenly, he thought that if the Demon Emperor was going to appear here, the remaining 4 kings couldn't suppress the 2 Dragon Kings and the many masters of the Fire Dragon country. Moreover, his speculation at the beginning was that the Empire and the Fire Dragon country had joined hands. This speculation was the most likely, which meant. Chapter 1165. Hey, suddenly, a palm came from behind and patted Dean's shoulder. Dean woke up from his thoughts and was shocked. His perception instantly swept to the person behind him, but found that it was an ordinary civilian with osteoporosis. His tense body could not help but relax, and his mouth slightly twitched. He did not expect to be scared by an ordinary person. What's the matter? Dean looked at him. The one who patted Dean's shoulder was a young man. He looked at the woman who was knocked out by Dean in surprise. Suddenly, he noticed the bracelet on her wrist. His eyes widened, and he was furious. He grabbed Dean's clothes and said, "How dare you touch my girlfriend? Do you want to die?" Dean raised his hand and gently shook the young man's wrist. The pain made the young man loosen his grip. Dean pushed him away. "Since she is your girlfriend, I'll give her back to you." Dean pushed the unconscious woman into the arms of the young man and squeezed into the crowd. The young man was about to rush up, but he couldn't see Dean's figure. He held the unconscious woman in his arms and glared at the direction of Dean's departure. After a long time, the anger on his face slowly disappeared. "Oh!" The woman woke up from the young man's arms. She covered her head and looked at the young man who was holding her. She was confused. "Who are you?" The young man didn't speak. He seemed to reach out to hug her, but his arms suddenly accelerated and hit the back of the woman's head. She was knocked out again. "He is the variable." The youth stared at the direction of Dean's departure and muttered in an inaudible voice. Dean left the shelter and was ready to go to the location where the host was buried. The Federation's host was buried in the center of the city. The defense system was spread out layer by layer. No matter which angle the attack came from, the difficulty was the same. Dean wasn't worried that Lin Chongsheng would move the host. The first reason was that the smart host was huge and connected to a large number of attached machines. The second reason was that there was no safer place than this city in the entire Federation. Once the host was moved out, it was equivalent to throwing gold out of the door. It would be easy for them to find it. Dean avoided the patrolling mechanical soldiers and the surveillance cameras around the city. He carefully lurked forward. When he was 50 miles away from the main computer, he saw from the wristwatch that the black-robed man was killed by the Mechanical Legion. His body was crushed by the super-ion cannon. He was dead. Dean narrowed his eyes. If he didn't know that the black-robed man was the bait sent by the Demon Emperor, he would have attacked the computer by himself. If the bait wasn't for Lin Chongsheng to see, then it was for me to see. The Demon Emperor has most likely found out about my existence. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that my identity is a top secret in the Federation. Only a small portion of the upper echelons of the Terrace Financial Group knows about it, and even those who know about it aren't clear. The only ones who know the truth are probably Jasalodi and a few of the directors who were there back then. Dean's eyes flashed. It was either that the Devil Emperor had arranged a spy, or that the Devil Emperor had disguised himself as one of them. If it was the latter, then it was too terrible. After thinking for a moment, Dean found a pool in a nearby park and hid there. He didn't want to help the Demon Emperor and the others take action. At the bottom of the pool, Dean dug a small hole and hid in it. He used the ability of the Sun Beast to burn the water in the hole, along with the oxygen. With his current ability, he could absorb oxygen from the soil. Even without oxygen, he could survive for several months. He could be called a strange life. He took out the wristwatch and continued to observe the movement outside. He was waiting for the Demon Emperor to launch the attack. A few hours passed. It was dusk. Crimson Moon led the four kings to occupy the main city of the Federation and suppress the Federation army from the inside out. The entire Federation could only rely on the private armed forces of the four consortiums to resist. At this moment, countless civilians in the Federation saw how terrifying the private armed forces of the four consortiums were. They weren't any worse than the Federation's army. Moreover, they exposed many military weapons that were more terrifying than the previous one. The Lok Fei Consortium took out the monster mecha that they had secretly researched and displayed a power that even the creator's mecha couldn't match. They resisted a large number of attacks from the Abyss. The Milan Consortium provided a large number of arms to all the armies of the 100 cities. This consortium that survived on arms marketing seemed to have an endless supply of ammunition. Moreover, the transportation channels were extremely rich. Even during the time of war when the cities were blockaded, they were still able to transport a large number of their own ammunition. The Michael Financial Group was the only one of the four major financial groups that did not have anything to do with armed forces. It could be said that the Terrace Financial Group was the only one out of the four major financial groups that did not have anything to do with armed forces. It could be said that the Terrace Financial Group was the only one among the four major financial groups that did not have anything to do with armed forces. It could be said that the Terrace Financial Group was the only one that produced the technological products in every field in the Federation. The Terrace Financial Group would be responsible for almost all of the technological products in the Federation. Regardless of whether it was real estate, firearms, or entertainment, they were all sold by the Michael Financial Group. They had the most distribution channels and the highest reputation. In fact, the Michael Consortium could even use its own business capabilities to kill a product that could become a household name before it even reached the manufacturer's doorstep. At this moment, the amount of money that the Michael Financial Group had poured into the battlefield was enough to suffocate countless civilians. Although they knew that the Michael Financial Group was rich and could easily create a powerful family, they didn't expect this to be nothing. Some people had compared it and were shocked to find that the annual income of the entire federal government wasn't even 1% of the Michael Financial Group's vast financial resources. What was the concept? It meant that the foundation of the Michael Consortium was enough to match the Federation's 100 years of operation. It was a shocking and unbelievable number. The Terrace Consortium had also sent a large number of creators mecha and various magical technological products to bring great obstacles to the Abyss. Dean toured the situation of the Federation. At the moment, the federal government was almost paralyzed. Although most of the Imperial legions had been obliterated by the nuclear bombs, but there were still a lot of them who had survived. Moreover, it seemed that many legions had crossed the peace circle and attacked the 12 border cities of the Federation. They were killing everywhere. The 4 consortiums can support the situation even without the Federation government. It won't take long for the 4 kings to retreat. Dean read the news and combined it with Lin Chongqing's memory. Although the current situation had reached the hinterland of the Federation, but the strength of the Empire wasn't enough for them to swallow the entire Federation. The 4 consortiums were Lin Chongqing's arms and legs. At this moment, they were playing an unimaginable combat power. Lock Consortium had developed a 5-star monster mecha which could suppress the king. The Abyss had encountered a 5-star monster mecha, but it didn't take long before it was beheaded. Dean knew that the Federation had super Raytheon cannon. This was a city of the Federation, so the energy reserves were enough for the cannon to display a terrifying power. Moreover, the elite mechanical legion created by Lin Chongqing hadn't been dispatched yet. The Demon Emperor's opportunity would be missed when Crimson Moon retreated. The situation had forced him to take action. Dean quietly waited. He was a bit nervous in his heart. If the Demon Emperor didn't take action, then he would have to take action. If he missed this opportunity, it would be very difficult to kill Lin Chongqing. For him, this was also his only chance. His situation was even more dangerous than the Demon Emperor. The Demon Emperor could retreat to the Empire, but he couldn't. The night was approaching. The 4 kings were being pushed back by the demonic mechas and the creator god mechas, as well as the super Raytheon cannon. Although nuclear weapons couldn't be used in the city, Lin Chongqing seemed to have already considered such a situation. Just the demonic mechas and the super Raytheon cannon were enough to suppress the 4 kings. Soon, the first king to be sacrificed appeared. It was the heavily injured Blood Thorn Monarch. Chapter 1166. As soon as King Demon I was injured, he immediately withdrew from the battlefield and disappeared without a trace. There were no more news reports about him. Only Crimson Moon and Light King were left on the battlefield, but the Federation's mechanical army and mecha seemed to be endless, especially the creation god mecha. Although its reaction during battle was not as good as the real king, its performance was not bad at all. Once it was damaged, it would immediately withdraw from the battlefield and be replaced by a new mecha, while the injured mecha would return to the factory outside the battlefield for repair. The one who repaired the mecha was also a top-notch professional mecha repairman. In less than 10 minutes, a tattered creation god mecha was refurbished and put into the battlefield again. As long as there was no shortage of parts and materials, the creation god mecha could be repaired continuously and fight continuously. Although Crimson Moon and Light King were brave, it was difficult for 2 fists to fight 4 hands. Not to mention there were more than 20 creation god mecha. The depth of their foundation shocked Crimson Moon and Light King, as well as countless Federation residents. They can still bear it. Dean saw the reports on the news. There were too many media, and, at this moment, many media risked their lives to go to the edge of the battlefield to broadcast live. Among them, there were also many videos taken by refugees uploaded, so that other cities far away from the battlefield could also see this dangerous and tragic battle. Dean looked at the distant sky. A black curtain and a dazzling sun hung in the sky. It was the respective demonic domains of Crimson Moon and Light King. Their strength had reached the limit of life, like the Supermen of the old era, facing missiles and cannons. Even ion cannons and laser swords could hardly hurt their bodies. However, there was always an end to human strength. When the sky was full of stars, Crimson Moon and Light King had been injured many times, and their momentum was far less powerful than before. However, the Federation suffered more heavy losses. Countless broken mechanical soldiers piled up on the street below the battlefield, and the rest of the 3-star and 4-star mecha were lost in the hundreds. More than a dozen creation god mecha were also destroyed, and nearly 10 of them self-destructed. Dean frowned, his heart getting more and more nervous. More than 10 minutes later, suddenly Dean, who was watching the news, felt the ground shake violently, followed by a dazzling light and a loud noise coming from afar. He looked up and saw the night sky on the other side of the host city burst into a dazzling light, like a rising sun, illuminating more than half of the host city. Dean was relieved. His first thought was that the Demon Emperor couldn't bear it anymore and made a move, which was a good thing for him. He quickly moved from his hiding place and rushed towards the explosion site. At the same time, his see-through eye power expanded to the extreme, and his pupils kept contracting. His golden pupils shrank to the size of a golden bean. His line of sight quickly passed through the skyscrapers, and he saw the situation at the explosion site. There were actually 8 figures that were as vigorous as the sun at the center of the explosion. The heat emanating from their bodies was astonishing. They were all king-level life energies. Dean was aghast. He didn't expect that there were so many kings hidden in this city. The location of the explosion was the location where Lin Chongqing's mainframe was hiding. A conjecture instantly appeared in his mind. Their previous silence and the use of Crimson Moon and the Light King to restrain the majority of the Federation's combat power was not only to attract Lin Chongqing's attention, but also to buy time for them to find out the whereabouts of the mainframe. 8 kings. Is this the hidden strength of the Empire? No, the king of Fire Dragon Nation has also come. Dean instantly narrowed his eyes, and his body slightly slowed down. He scanned the surroundings, looking for the hidden Demon Emperor. As matters stood, he was 100% sure that the Demon Emperor was in this city. At least one of the 2 Dragon Kings would come here, and they wouldn't be willing to let the Demon Emperor pick up the Federation's spoils alone. At this moment, Dean saw full metal robots rushing out from the heat of the explosion site. They looked similar to humans, and some of them looked exactly the same. It seemed that they were made from the same batch of molds. Some of them looked grotesque, and they appeared at the center of the high temperature of the explosion. They weren't affected in the slightest. They were the top-level mechanical warriors that Lin Chongqing had arranged to be near the mainframe. Part of Lin Chongqing's memory jumped out in Dean's mind again, and he quickly recognized the models and functions of these mechanical warriors, as well as the attack methods they were good at. Some were good at close combat, and the chip had recorded the evolved moves of countless fighting masters. Some were equipped with terrifying firepower that was enough to kill a king. Every mechanical warrior was comparable to a creation god mecha, and in terms of combat ability, they were stronger than a creation god mecha. Lin Chongqing had done a test, and these mechanical warriors could easily defeat a creation god mecha. However, the mechanical warriors continued to rush out. In the blink of an eye, there were 17 or 18 of them. In the blink of an eye, the number increased to more than 30, and finally the 49th mechanical warrior came out. 49 king-level warriors. Even the odd number was more than the 8 king-level warriors. Dean was already aware of this, but he still felt a strong pressure at the moment. He suddenly wanted to send a message to the Demon Emperor or the 8 King level warriors and tell them the method to crack this batch of mechanical warriors. At this moment, as the mechanical warriors appeared and guarded the building where the mainframe was buried, the 8 Kings seemed to be very proud and did not attack immediately. After observing for a while, only one of them stepped out. This person's body was covered with purple scales, and his body slowly elongated. He crawled on the ground and unexpectedly turned into a lifelike purple-scaled flood dragon. When his body was about 10 feet long, he suddenly looked up to the sky and roared. His body expanded again and unexpectedly became more than 10 feet long. He stood in front of the mechanical warriors and raised his claws to slap the ground. The momentum was terrifying, and the scales on his body were curled up with electric current. It seemed that his body had been strengthened by static electricity. Dean was startled, and there was a trace of pity and indifference in his eyes. These mechanical warriors were different from humans. They didn't have a heat source or murderous aura, and it was difficult to determine the specific strength without fighting. These king-level warriors obviously didn't expect that all the mechanical warriors in front of them were comparable to them. Soon, the demonized, purple-scaled Flood Dragon King was the first to rush out. The electric current around his body gathered at the horn on his head, forming a ball of lightning, and shot out electric currents to strike the mechanical warriors in front of him. Bang! Bang! The electric current hit the mechanical warriors, making crackling sounds and emitting green smoke. However, the mechanical warriors all propped up a defensive shield to resist the electric current, and there wasn't the slightest damage. This scene surprised the purple-scaled Flood Dragon. His magic marks could create strong electric current between his muscles, and it was no less than lightning. It had the ability to restrain these electricity-driven mechanical things. How could it be ineffective at this moment? While he was still in shock, the mechanical warriors that he attacked seemed to have activated a program and immediately attacked. Some of them directly pounced over, and their explosive speed was incomparably fast. In an instant, they rushed in front of the purple-scaled Flood Dragon. They raised their hands and slashed out with white and purple laser blades, cutting open the scales of the purple-scaled Flood Dragon. The cuts were so deep that bones could be seen. Not good. The other 7 were shocked when they saw this scene. They wanted to help, but it was already too late. The purple-scaled Flood Dragon King was surrounded by several mechanical warriors, and it was quickly cut into several pieces. Its body didn't even have time to shrink and demonize before it was killed. The mechanical warriors originally had strength no weaker than the king-level warriors, and they were attacking together. The larger the purple-scaled Flood Dragon's demonized body was, the more areas it would be attacked, and the faster it would die. The others couldn't even help in time. At this time, the eyes of the other mechanical warriors flashed red, and they suddenly moved together, pouncing toward the 7 king-level warriors. Not good. Run. The 7 king-level warriors knew from the moment the mechanical warriors moved that these iron lumps were countless times stronger than the mechanical warriors they had seen in the past. They decisively retreated without the slightest hesitation. The 7 kings had just retreated several thousand meters when they suddenly stopped. They saw an energy barrier surrounded by lightning, like a barrier array, monopolizing their path of retreat and surrounding them inside. The electric current added to the energy barrier caused the air to have a scorching feeling. That purple-scaled Flood Dragon King is good at controlling lightning. If he doesn't die, then they can escape. Dean sighed when he saw the lightning array. The 7 king-level warriors were like turtles in a jar, and their only way out was behind a lightning array. Although the mechanical warriors were terrifying, the biggest drawback was that they couldn't move too far away from the host. The limit of their distance was where the lightning array rose. The reason why they couldn't move too far away was because of the problem of energy. As early as the old era, the concept of science and technology had already crossed the solar system and looked beyond the galaxy. But because of the problem of energy, they couldn't even leave the solar system. This problem was also bothering the Federation and Lin Chongqing. Although they had made new breakthroughs in the new energy source, The energy consumption of these mechanical warriors was too large, and they had to be recharged at all times. The area where they moved was like a huge charging board. Once they left, they would lose the ability to move, and it would be difficult to exert their strength. Chapter 11:67. Just when the seven kings were forced into desperation, there was a sudden roar. The huge fireball blasted a hole in the energy shield, forming a temporary gap. Seeing this gap, the seven kings went through without saying anything. Outside the gap, there was a middle-aged dragon man with red scales all over his body. He had a sharp horn on top of his head, and his body was emitting terrifying heat. The air within a few meters around him was slightly distorted. Dean's face changed when he saw this person. From Lin Chongqing's memory, he recognized that this was one of the two dragon lords of the Fire Dragon country. His title was Candle Dragon Lord, and he was in charge of the north of the Fire Dragon country. The other was Flame Dragon Lord, and he was in charge of the south of the Fire Dragon country. He didn't expect that this attack on the Federation would be an alliance between the Fire Dragon country and the Empire. The strongest people in the world are gathered here. The top group of powerhouses are also here. Dean's eyelids twitched slightly. This was not a casual war, but a pinnacle war. The outcome was directly related to the future of mankind. At the same time, after Lord Torch Dragon raised his hand and blasted open the lightning energy shield, he waited for the seven kings to gather around him. His face was completely red, and his hair and beard were all standing on end. He raised his hand and pushed forward. The center of his palm was as red as a soldering iron. This red energy left his palm and grew bigger and bigger in the air, turning into a burning palm. It slapped the slowly recovering lightning energy shield and hit a mechanical warrior directly. The scorching energy directly destroyed the energy shield outside the mechanical warrior and imprinted on its body. With a bang, the fiery palm suddenly tightened and grabbed the mechanical warrior. With a whoosh, it was pulled back and appeared in front of Lord Torch Dragon. As soon as the mechanical warrior's body left the lightning energy shield, the red light in its mechanical compound eyes dimmed. It didn't even have time to brandish its weapon when its body stiffened and became motionless. Candle Dragon Lord's eyes flashed. He grabbed it and threw it thousands of meters away. It seems to have lost its target. These mechanical warriors will stop attacking if they leave the lightning energy shield. The seven kings were surprised and doubtful when they saw this, but they were more excited. If this was the case, they still had a chance to fight back. Otherwise, they could only flee. After all, the joint attack of nearly 50 kings was too terrifying. These mechanical warriors can't leave this area. Grab them or push them away, Candle Dragon Lord said slowly. The previous method had confirmed his information, and he immediately informed the seven kings. At the same time, he once again raised his hand and sent out two flaming palms, blasting open the lightning energy shield and grabbing the two mechanical warriors inside, preparing to pull them out. However, before the flaming palms could retract, the mechanical warriors next to them attacked and smashed the palms. The other seven kings knew the way to break the barrier. They attacked from the outside of the lightning energy barrier. Some of them threw out vine-like weapons, piercing through the lightning energy barrier and locking onto the mechanical warriors, dragging them out. Some of the arms went berserk and became dozens of feet long. They tore apart the lightning energy shield, and the back of the hands emitted lightning. They were not afraid of the lightning on the energy shield, and they grabbed a bunch of mechanical warriors and threw them out. These mechanical warriors either resisted, dodged, or counterattacked, but compared to the kings, they lacked the ability to transform. They could only rely on their alloy bodies to fight. The king's attack power couldn't break the special alloy outside their bodies, but they could drag them. Once they were dragged out of the lightning energy shield, the mechanical warriors would lose their energy supply. The energy stored in their bodies wouldn't be enough to support one attack, and their bodies would immediately freeze. It must be known that their speed and every attack were at the king level, and the energy they needed was extremely astonishing. Their small bodies were stuffed with all kinds of weapons, and there was no extra space to install a large-capacity energy board. Once the energy board was too large, it would become their weakness, and it would be easy to target. Dean looked at the mechanical warriors being dragged out one after another. Although their bodies were unscathed, they lost their energy as soon as they left the lightning energy shield and turned into scrap iron. This terrifying army that was enough to flatten any country was disintegrated. He couldn't help but sigh. At the same time, he was a bit afraid of the Fire Dragon country. The weakness of this mechanical army was top secret. Apart from Lin Changsheng, only a few chairmen of the terrorist consortium knew about it. Even Lin Changsheng didn't know about it, and it was covered up by Lin Changsheng. He didn't expect the Dragon King of the Fire Dragon country to know about it. It was hard to imagine how deep their infiltration into the Federation was. Maybe they had secretly infiltrated and grasped this information decades, or even hundreds of years ago. But even if they know this secret, it's still too difficult to break through here, Dean thought. At this time, the remaining 40 or so mechanical warriors suddenly retreated to the front of the building where the mainframe was located, away from the energy shield's boundary. The Seven Kings and the Candle Dragon King's attacks couldn't extend so far. After all, the lightning energy shield was also an attack weapon that couldn't be underestimated, and they couldn't extend their genetic demonization into it. We can't do anything if they stay there. Damn, the hidden strength of the Federation is too terrifying. These iron lumps can be built as long as there are resources. Unlike us, we can't rely on materials to cultivate them. The Seven Kings stood outside the energy shield, angry and anxious, but helpless. The Candle Dragon King said calmly, "Don't worry. If they don't come out, then let them stay here forever." The Seven Kings looked at him, their eyes full of awe. They didn't dare to rashly ask. Not long after, a series of explosions suddenly came from the distance. The flames of the explosions lit up the night sky, attracting everyone's attention. Battle network? Dean was slightly startled when he saw the direction of the explosions, and then his eyes narrowed. The explosions were as continuous as a mountain range, and the flames extended for a very long time. They all exploded at the same time in a very short period of time, destroying the 3 supercomputers that assisted the mainframe in computing. If these 3 supercomputers were destroyed, nearly half of the Federation's instruments would be paralyzed. Just when everyone was shocked, the Candle Dragon King's eyes suddenly flashed, and he whispered, "Retreat." After that, he took the lead to withdraw. The Seven Kings were startled, but their reaction wasn't slow, and they quickly followed. The moment they left the lightning energy shield, a ray of light cut through the sky like a signal flare, falling toward the city, and the target was the building where the mainframe was located. Missiles were launched from all around the city at the same time, trying to intercept this ray of light, but figures flew out from the darkness, blocking all the intercepting weapons and mechanical warriors. Chapter 1168. Dean could see the internal structure of the Dawn. It was a nuclear bomb. If not for the interceptor missiles, he would have thought that Lin Changsheng was ready to self-destruct. If this was the case, it could only mean that the host city was a pit arranged by Lin Changsheng. It was beyond his expectation that everyone would be buried. But now it seemed that the missile should come from the Empire or the Fire Dragon country. He thought of the airships and other technological items built by the Empire on the God of War's wall. With the technology of the Empire, it was not difficult to imagine that they could build a nuclear bomb. Since the nuclear bomb was not released by Lin Changsheng, Dean didn't plan to escape. His position at the moment was more than 10 miles away from the center of the explosion. Even if the nuclear bomb exploded, it wouldn't hurt him. Moreover, Lin Changsheng wouldn't just stand by and watch. As Dean was quietly watching the changes, the nuclear bomb fell like the dawn. Suddenly, from the front of the building where the host was buried, the street-like ground was raised like a metal plate. From the inside, 2 dark holes were exposed. Inside were triangular launchers. The energy quickly gathered and shot. 2 blue light beams instantly penetrated the sky and hit the nuclear bomb. Boom! The nuclear bomb was detonated in midair. For a moment, the world lost its color. After a huge rumble, the world suddenly became silent. His ears seemed to fall into a very long period of tinnitus. He couldn't hear any sound. In his sight, there was a sudden burst of strong light in midair. The world was snow-white. Even Dean's eyes were slightly squinted by the light. He felt a burst of pain. If an ordinary person looked directly at this distance, even if they closed their eyes, they would be blind through the eyelids. In the silence, Dean felt the ground under his feet tremble. It seemed that the earth was trembling in fear. The next moment, the world seemed to recover from silence. In the middle of the explosion, a burst of blazing light swept out. Like a beam of light, it spread in all directions and submerged everything. Any color in front of this strong light was overshadowed. The world became pure white. All the buildings were submerged in the light. Apart from the deep darkness that shrouded everything, there was also this extremely dazzling light. Dean squinted his eyes as he tried to observe the power of the nuclear bomb. He was able to see the buildings near the explosion site of the nuclear bomb. The high temperature and radiation quickly crushed everything like a cutting machine. The heat wave quickly spread out in all directions. A large number of buildings were turned into ashes or scorched by the high temperature. It seemed that they were going to melt. The building where the mainframe was buried was razed to the ground, and the street on the ground showed signs of melting. The street looked like it was made of bricks, but it was actually made of metal, and it melted and deformed under the high temperature. Master Torch Dragon and the Seven Kings were not at the center of the explosion. At this moment, they had all turned into layers of demonic limbs that collapsed under the high temperature, but they did not suffer much injury. When the explosion swept in front of Dean, he quickly absorbed the heat source in the air. At the same time, his body turned into a huge rock. Under the destruction of the explosion, pieces of stone shell broke out, but the real body at the core was not affected. Soon, the nuclear bomb explosion gradually subsided. Master Torch Dragon and the Seven Kings rushed to the place where the mainframe was buried. They saw that the huge war castle-like building had disappeared. More than 40 mechanical warriors guarding in front of the building had also disappeared. There was no trace left on the ground. They were all obliterated. That's way too terrifying. Don't be so optimistic. I saw them hiding in the underground base below. Soon, some kings who didn't notice the underground base also noticed that there was an underground base under the raised building. Their faces suddenly changed. If more than 40 mechanical warriors were guarding the underground base, they would have no way to deal with them unless they launched another nuclear bomb. Thinking of this, some people looked at Master Torch Dragon and waited for him to make a decision. Dean's eyes flashed. He knew that Lin Changsheng was left with his last card. More than 40 mechanical warriors, although not destroyed, had lost their role. The purpose of a nuclear bomb was not to directly destroy this place, but to destroy the city's power grid and energy supply system. Under the baptism of the nuclear bomb, the city's power grid was completely paralyzed. The nearby energy supply channels were also destroyed. The remaining energy supply channels were not enough to support so many mechanical warriors. This underground base was Lin Changsheng's nest and also his tortoise shell. Even if another nuclear bomb was launched, it would not be able to blow up this underground base. The entire base was made of a special alloy, which was extremely precious. Its hardness was more than 300 times that of diamond. Lin Changsheng had invested more than 200 years of accumulation in this place. This was the reason why Lin Changsheng could not move the mainframe out of the city. The materials of the king's mechanical warriors were fused with some incomplete special base alloy, but it was enough to resist the attack of the king. This underground base was enough to withstand the bombardment of thousands of missiles. Even if it was blocked by a nuclear bomb, the only way to break it was to use some extremely special magic marks. Some magic marks could digest stones, some could melt metals, and some could feed on flames. As far as Dean knew, there were some magic marks that were targeted at this special alloy base. They should have learned the changes of the magic marks before coming here. Dean's eyes flashed. He was ready to let them take the lead. As he expected, the Torch Dragon Master had already brought the 7 kings to the underground base. Their bodies transformed and melted into the special alloy base like mucus, disappearing very quickly. Dean tried to use his X-ray vision to penetrate the underground base, but was blocked. The materials of the underground base were similar to the materials of the demonic insects and the origami spaceship. It should be known that these spaceships were the spaceships that had crossed the starry sky to come to the Earth. The density of the spaceships was extremely astonishing. If one didn't have the few magic marks, it would be impossible to crack it. Dean didn't rush to follow them in. Instead, he waited in place. When the nuclear bomb was launched, many mysterious figures appeared in the sky to resist the intercepting missiles. This made him a little afraid. In the dark outside, the Demon Emperor was still covetously watching. Chapter 1169. After Master Candle Dragon and the rest of them snuck into the underground base, peace was gradually restored on the ground, and the aftermath of the nuclear explosion died down too. However, the heat in the air was still lingering, and their vision seemed to be somewhat cloudy and twisted. A few minutes passed in silence, but Dean didn't see the Demon Emperor appear. It seemed that the Demon Emperor was watching or staying outside to support Candle Dragon Lord and the others. Dean was determined to wait outside. Time ticked by. Dean's anxiety was also growing rapidly every minute and second. Suddenly, a beep sound came from his hand. He was startled and looked down. It was the watch that he took from the woman's hand. It was ringing. When he looked down, a face suddenly flashed on the wristwatch and occupied the entire surface. Lin Changsheng. Dean's pupils shrank, but soon restored his calmness. He stared at Lin. "You knew my position and have been monitoring me with this? Help me." Lin Changsheng didn't respond to Dean's words, but directly said, "Come in and help me. I didn't expect the Fire Dragon country to join in. The Demon Emperor is lurking in the dark outside. I don't know his position. Come and help me." Dean raised his eyebrows. "Are you drunk or not awake?" Lin Changsheng looked straight at him. His expression was like that of a robot without any reaction. He said word by word, "I know how to treat the undead. I have a way in my hands. If you want to know, come in and help me. Otherwise, if the host is destroyed or restarted, the top secret information will be destroyed. You will never find a solution by yourself." After that, his avatar flickered like an electric current and disappeared. Dean looked at the watch that returned to normal. His face turned gloomy and his fingers clenched into fists. Although intuition told him that 90% of Lin Changsheng was lying. After all, he had plundered part of Lin Changsheng's memory, and there was no way to deal with undeads. However, he didn't dare to gamble. If it was true, then he would miss it forever. Dean clenched his teeth and rushed out. His body quickly changed. He dived into the underground base and penetrated through the special alloy. It was a wonderful feeling. After penetrating the outer shell of the base, Dean saw the internal structure of the base. It turned out to be an extremely empty metal room. It was like a container magnified hundreds of times. There were no small rooms or offices to rest and work. It was full of various machines. Some were auxiliary hosts, some were maintenance robots, and some were fighting robots. However, at this moment, this place was in a mess. The wreckage of the king's mechanical warriors from before was scattered all over the ground, and many instruments had been destroyed. There were also 2 corpses of the kings lying on the ground, their heads and bodies split into pieces. A large hole had been blasted open in a place where a large number of pipes were densely packed. At this moment, the sounds of intense fighting could be heard, as well as mournful roars. These roars sounded like demons, but also like evil spirits. It was terrifying to hear. Dean heard this completely inhuman roar, and his heart suddenly went cold. 2 words flashed in his mind: undead. He suddenly remembered that Lin Changsheng still had the undead army in his hands. Even if the nuclear bomb destroyed the energy channels around the base and turned the king's mechanical warriors into scrap iron, there was still the undead army. Thinking of this, Dean looked at the corpses of the 2 kings. He found that the corpses were not destroyed by machines or hot weapons, but torn apart. The method was extremely bloody and cruel. He turned his skin into stone and slowly approached the hole. Looking at it from the corner of his eye, Don saw a terrifying scene. Below the hole was the second floor of the underground base. At this moment, there were monstrous limbs dancing in the air. Giant octopus-like tentacles were waving around, and there was no sign of a human being. Under the attack of these violent, demonized, monstrous limbs, a figure with disheveled hair bared his fangs and brandished his claws. His movements were rough and violent, and although he burst forth with astonishing speed, there was not the slightest heat reaction from his body. Undead. Dean saw the figure with disheveled hair, and his face changed. He didn't expect that Lin Changsheng would really leave an undead to guard here. Moreover, the strength of this undead was so strong that he felt the crisis of death. It was far more terrifying than the average king. Black Wind can't hold on any longer. If it dies, the host will fall into the hands of Candle Dragon. Lin Changxing's figure appeared on a broken instrument next to Dean. He looked at Dean with no expression. If you want to know the way to save the undead, then help me. Dean's face sank as he said, "Do you have other cards in your hand? I don't believe that you didn't expect that the Fire Dragon country would intervene. This scene should have long been within your calculations. What is your plan? Are you going to catch us all in one fell swoop?" Lin Changsheng said expressionlessly, "I'm not an omnipotent god. It's impossible to calculate everything. Moreover, I didn't expect them to smuggle a nuclear bomb into the territory. There are traitors in the high level of the Federation. Although I can monitor every corner of the Federation through a variety of instruments, but not all the monitored information will be fed back to my brain. Otherwise, if I know everyone's secrets, my consciousness would have long been squeezed to death. It's hard to fathom people's minds. Even I can't see the thoughts in other people's hearts, just like I couldn't see the thoughts in your heart." Dean sneered. "Do you think I will believe you? I'm beginning to suspect that you arranged a team of ordinary mechanical soldiers to shoot me with special undead virus bullets. The purpose is to pull me to help you at this moment. You want me to believe that you have a way to solve the undead. You know what I want, so you can figure out my thoughts." Lin Changsheng expressionlessly said, "It's meaningless to say these words. Even if I say it, you may not believe me. In short, if you want to solve the problem of the undeads, then help me. If you don't want it, then when Black Wind is defeated, I will detonate all the nuclear bombs under the city and die with you." Dean's heart was cold, but soon he was relieved. With his ability, as long as he rushed to the air in time and was not in the center of the explosion, he should be able to survive. "I'll say it first. I'll help you repel the Candle Dragon Lord, but you have to tell me the way to deal with the undead. I won't help you with anything else. You know why I came here. The grievances between us can't be resolved." Dudian said in a cold voice. Lin Changsheng indifferently said, "All right." Dean didn't say anything more. He took a deep breath, turned around, and jumped into the hole. The arrangement of various genes appeared in his mind. The genes in his body were active like boiling water. Chapter 1170. Be careful behind you. Dean heard an angry shout as he appeared on the second floor of the base. There were 7 or 8 huge monsters on the second floor. They were like angry monsters. All of them were 10 or 20 meters in size. Some of them were like octopuses with a lot of blood-red tentacles. Some of them were like crocodiles and pangolins with a mouth full of sharp teeth. Some of them were like cobras, but their bodies were 30 or 40 meters long. They were as thick as a water tank and had fin-like blades on both sides of their body. The most eye-catching one was a mythical dragon whose whole body was burning with flames. The difference was that it didn't have antlers on top of its head, but sharp horns like a dead tree. There were 7 or 8 2-meter-long spikes on its back. There were purple whiskers on both sides of its body. They seemed to be close to the body, but it seemed that they could turn into sharp blades at any time. Terrifying heat radiated from the fire dragon's body, and the other monsters around it also avoided it. Dean judged that the fire dragon should be the incarnation of the Candle Dragon Lord. At the moment, it was fighting with an undead with disheveled hair. The undead's appearance was close to that of a human. Its hair was solid, and its pupils were blood red. Its arms were half as long as a human's. There were 6 or 7 fingers on its palms, which looked like claws. There were black blades on its knees and back. Its movements were extremely fast. It was like a shadow shuttling between the transformed bodies of the 7 kings. One of the kings who didn't participate in the battle noticed Dean as he appeared. He immediately shouted to remind Dean. Dean quickly scanned the battlefield situation and the positions of the kings. He made judgments and prepared for the battle. At the same time, he noticed that the structure of the room was extremely wide. The surrounding walls were made of metal. There was no furniture or sundries like the first floor. There was a giant tree-like instrument behind the battle. It extended complex pipes and twisted intestines. There was a translucent energy shield in front of the instrument. One of the kings stretched out his limbs and slapped the energy shield. It seemed that the energy shield bounced back in a blood mist. Go to hell. The king who didn't participate in the battle roared and rushed towards Dean. He saw through the heat source that Dean's physique was similar to his, so he didn't hesitate to rush up. Dean noticed that the nearest king monster was rushing towards him. This monster was 7 or 8 meters tall and had sharp claws. It didn't seem to be very aggressive. Dean noticed that the other 2 kings were also rushing towards him. He took a deep breath, and a trace of madness flashed in his eyes. His body swelled to more than 10 meters, and the sharp blades on his body extended like a sea urchin. However, the sharp blades were more flexible than the spikes on the surface of the sea urchin. At this moment, he was waving his blades in a disorderly manner, but the latter's line of sight was blocked. Die! Dean roared in a low voice. In the blink of an eye, he collided with a huge raccoon-like monster. At the moment of impact, the hairs on the latter's body grew crazily and wrapped around Dean's blade like a sponge, trying to wrap the blade. Dean felt that there were layers of obstacles on the blade. It seemed that there were innumerable strands of power pulling the blade, but the next moment, the pulling force suddenly disappeared. The high temperature attached to the blade burned all the puffy hair of the Raccoon King. Puff, 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 puff. The blade cut into the body of the Raccoon King. Although it didn't directly cut off the body, the cuts were deep enough to see the bones. Just as Dean's blade hit the opponent, he suddenly felt a slight pain in his chest. He couldn't help but glance over and saw that there was a crack on his petrified chest. He didn't know when the attack had hit him. Whoosh! At the same time, the Raccoon King pulled back and landed in the distance. There was a bit of shock in his eyes. It seemed that he didn't expect Dean's attack to be so terrifying. It almost cut his body into several pieces. If he hadn't observed the genes of a 5-star legendary monster with extremely terrifying defense, and if he hadn't used his internal bones and flesh to construct the body of the 5-star legendary monster, then he would have been killed directly. What a terrifying blade. Fortunately, he has already been hit by my stinger. After I kill him, I can carefully observe the structure of his blade. The Raccoon King secretly calculated in his heart. His eyes had become a little fiery as he looked at Dean. In his eyes, Dean was already a dead man. The Raccoon King was best at using poison. Because of this, there was no place for him to use his skills in the face of the terrifying undead. After all, the undead virus in the opponent's body was the world's most insoluble and most terrifying poison. It was enough to obliterate and assimilate all venom and bacteria. Dean didn't feel that the wound was deep, so he didn't care. The attack power of the demonized monster wasn't strong, and his petrified body was relatively hard. Just as he was about to attack again, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. There was a burst of pain in his chest. It was only a short period of time from beginning to end. He quickly used his X-ray vision to look inside his body. What he saw shocked him. He saw that the inside of his petrified chest had turned black. The petrified body seemed to be moldy, and fine hair was growing out. This is poison? But my body is petrified. How could I be poisoned? Dean's heart was pounding. In this situation where he was outnumbered, if he was poisoned again, it was unknown whether he could survive. Moreover, the other 2 kings had already rushed over and launched an attack. He immediately used his sharp limbs to push himself away from the attacks of the 2 kings and retreated to the corner of the room. Facing the two kings who continued to rush over, Dean didn't have time to think about why his petrified body would turn black and be infected. Moreover, the black part was rapidly spreading at an extremely alarming speed. He fiercely clenched his teeth and used his X-ray vision to look into the depths of the black hairy substance. Suddenly, he saw countless black balls and particles spreading and splitting. At the same time, he split his attention into two. His entire body burned with raging flames, and he added them to his sharp blades, causing them to burn with flames. He quickly waved them around, creating a fire blade shield around his body, cutting off and burning the limbs of the two kings that were attacking him. The two kings screamed in pain and were somewhat horrified. They didn't expect Dean's strange blade limbs to be so terrifying. There was no hindrance in cutting their bodies. If their bodies were cut, wouldn't they be cut into two on the spot? While constantly waving the sharp blades to set up the fire shield, another part of Dean's mind was on the black hairy thing. In his eyes, the thing was constantly moving primitive changes, splitting, invading, swallowing. All these changes fell into his eyes. The structure of the monster was much more complex than the other demonized limbs, but the trajectory of the movement was repeated over and over again. Don't worry, he has been poisoned by me. Soon his whole body will be infected. Raccoon King climbed to the side of the other two kings who had rushed over to support. He looked at the fireblade shield in front of him with a leisurely look. The two kings next to him looked at each other and hesitated. They didn't have much confidence in the latter's poison, but Dean's sharp blades were too sharp and attached a terrifying flame temperature. They couldn't attack for a while unless they used some means to hurt themselves, but that was a bit not worth it. Moreover, they were still in the hinterland of the Federation. Who knew what dangers they would encounter? At this time, it was better to preserve their strength to deal with the unknown. At this time, an angry roar came from another place. They saw the Candle Dragon Lord and several other kings surrounding the horrifying undead, but only the flames on the Candle Dragon Lord body could suppress the horrifying undead. The attacks of the other kings were easily avoided. In addition, the latter was only about 3 meters in size, nearly half the height of a normal human. But in front of the demonized bodies of the other kings, it seemed incomparably small, like a flexible mouse. This undead's fighting mentality is the same as a human's. Part of the attention of the Raccoon King and the other two kings was always on the Candle Dragon Lord and the horrifying undead. At this moment, they couldn't help but feel shocked when they saw that they couldn't attack for a long time, especially the fighting methods of the undead. It was flexible and changeable, completely unlike the ordinary undead who only knew how to fight head-on. Poof! At this moment, one of the kings with blood-colored tentacles that looked like an octopus was suddenly seized by the horrifying undead. It hit the root of the blood-colored tentacle and directly sank into it, drilling into the king's body. The king suddenly screamed in horror. One of the blood-colored tentacles suddenly trembled violently and then bloomed like a flower bud. From it, a naked young man was thrown out and flew behind the Candle Dragon Lord. When a young man flew out, the giant octopus-like demonic body stopped moving. A cold light flashed in the eyes of the Candle Dragon Lord's demonized fire dragon. It suddenly spat out a large amount of flames, engulfing the empty demonic body. At the same time, it entangled the undead and waved its sharp claws to tear it apart. Boom! When the Candle Dragon Lord tore apart the main body of the empty demonic body, the horrifying undead drilled out of one of the inconspicuous tentacles. It turned and pounced on another king nearby, scaring the king into turning around and running away. Bloodhand has lost his demonic body and can no longer fight. I'll go support him. A white tiger-like king with a mouth full of wild boar fangs beside the Raccoon King said in a low voice. He was about to rush into the battlefield. Suddenly, the rapidly waving sharp blades in front of them slowly stopped. The flames dissipated, revealing Dean's body. Poison. The Raccoon King's eyes lit up when he noticed this scene. However, when he saw Dean's appearance, his face changed and he cried out, "How is this possible?" At this moment, the stony skin on Dean's chest had healed, and there was no sign of blackening around the wound. This made the Raccoon King incredulous. Dean's poison was more like a curse than a poison. It was a special super substance that could be destroyed and assimilated whether it was a stone or a tree. If it was flesh and blood, the speed of destruction would be even more astonishing. In his opinion, this was an undefeatable existence. With just this skill alone, he could easily kill demonic beasts as effortlessly as taking something out of his pocket. But at this moment, his poison seemed to have lost its effect. But he had clearly noticed that Dean was indeed poisoned. "You?" The two kings next to him noticed the Raccoon King's expression and immediately knew that the situation was not right. Their faces slightly changed as they stared at Dean with vigilance. "Is this what you're good at? Using poison to attack?" Dean looked at the Raccoon King with a very serious expression. He doubtfully asked, "Why did you choose such a stupid way of fighting? It doesn't make any sense, does it?" The Raccoon King's face changed. He felt his face burning, especially after boasting in front of the two kings next to him. In the blink of an eye, he was slapped in the face. He slightly gritted his teeth and didn't argue with Dean. He growled, "I miscalculated. Let's go together." The two kings next to him nodded slightly. There was a dignified look in their eyes as they rushed towards Dean from both sides. Using poison as a means of attack is very easy to crack. As long as you know the structure of this thing, you can change your cells into the same substance, assimilate it, and then change back into your own body. But looking at him, it seems that I can't solve this poison. Could it be that other kings can't learn genetic demonization as fast as I can? Dean looked at the three kings who were rushing towards him. In his heart, he was not as worried as before. He had vaguely guessed this when he was dealing with the strange poison. His body was different from ordinary kings. Although kings could learn other genes and carry out corresponding changes, there seemed to be some restrictions. But his body couldn't. This was the fundamental reason why Lin Changsheng coveted his body. And this also meant that he could grow quickly. For example, he had mastered the strange poison that the Raccoon King was confident in. Whoosh! The sharp blades on Dean's body suddenly extended and turned into dozens of sharp spears. They stabbed at the three kings who were surrounding him. More than a dozen sharp blades stabbed at the Raccoon King, while the other 30 sharp blades attacked from various angles towards the White Tiger King. The remaining blades released flames and attacked the scorpion-like king from the right. Chapter 1171. At the moment of the fight, Dean felt a burst of resistance in the air through his sharp blades. It came from a direction of the scorpion-like king. There seemed to be an inexplicable repulsive force around the Scorpion King, which slowed down the attack speed of his blades. However, the other dozen of his blades hit the Raccoon King. The latter's fluffy body turned into layers of soft shields, wrapping around the blades like a sponge. However, the flames attached to the blades burned the fluffy and cut the blades directly into the Raccoon King's body. But this time the Raccoon King was prepared. The fluffy growth on his body was extremely thick, which greatly reduced the damage of the blades. The Raccoon King's face changed slightly. The Raccoon King's face changed slightly. He didn't expect to be injured by Dean, even though he was prepared. He was about to turn around and attack again, but he suddenly felt that something was wrong with his body. The wounds that Dean had made showed no signs of healing. He didn't have time to examine them. He first withdrew from the battle, then retracted the fur around his wounds to look. He suddenly saw that 7 or 8 wounds had been cut, and the color had turned black. Poison. The Raccoon King was stunned. He was too familiar with the signs of poisoning. It turned out to be his own poison. The next moment, he suddenly reacted. He looked incredulously at Dean, who was besieged by the White Tiger and Scorpion Kings. Could it be that the latter had analyzed his poison and copied his ability in such a short time? Every king could analyze other abilities to control their body, learn from the genetic level, and then master new abilities. But it took time. Just analyzing the structure of an ability required extremely detailed observation, and learning it took a lot of time. Some abilities conflicted with the body. Even if they were analyzed, they couldn't learn it. They had to choose the ability that was suitable for them. In the Raccoon King's impression, only the Candle Dragon Lord and the Cheelin Dragon Lord could quickly learn and master new abilities. But when it came to complex abilities, the learning time would increase correspondingly. The specific length depended on the individual's perception. For example, the Raccoon King's ability was a 5-star legendary magic mark. Plus, he had studied different poisons for many years. He had observed their toxins and combined them with various poisons to develop his own unique poison ability. Even the Candle Dragon Lord would need a lot of time to crack it, but the other side had mastered it in just a few minutes. Raccoon King suddenly remembered the two kings who were still fighting against Dean. Be careful. His blade has my venom. Don't get hurt by him. In fact, the White Tiger King and the Scorpion King also avoided Dean's blade. From the first contact, the two of them felt the sharpness of the blade. Moreover, they didn't know Dean's ability, so they didn't dare to be hit easily. They had rich combat experience in their lives. Some people would smear the Walking Dead virus on their weapons. Even if the opponent was weaker than them, it could still be fatal. Therefore, they would never be careless. Like a lion fighting a rabbit, they would use all their strength. After the reminder, the Raccoon King saw that they had temporarily suppressed Dean, so he didn't think much about it. He quickly mobilized the genes in his body to assimilate the poison. Although the venom was terrible, it was his own poison after all, so it was basically ineffective against him. However, just as he was thinking about this, he suddenly realized that the genes he mobilized were unable to assimilate this part of the poison. In fact, the part of the venom he had transformed into was being melted by this part of the venom. How is this possible? The Raccoon King was stunned. He suspected that he had sensed wrongly. Once again, he transformed the tissues around the poisoned part into venom and assimilated it. But soon, the tissues that had been transformed into venom were quickly absorbed by the poison part, and the speed of infection was even faster. The Civet Cat King turned pale with fright and suddenly came to a realization. The poison part seemed to be a sign of infection from his own venom, but the poison was different from his own venom. Not only had his opponent broken through his venom, but he had also mixed in another venom composition, causing this venom to become even more potent than his own venom. Poison was his specialty, but at this moment he was being crushed by someone else's poison. The Raccoon King's face was ashen, but he was more afraid. He didn't have Dean's understanding and ability to quickly analyze the gene structure and learn how to copy it. Moreover, he knew the horror of his venom. Even if he cut off this part of the flesh, it would be useless. The venom had already invaded the whole body through the blood, but it was dormant everywhere. Do I have to abandon this body? Damn it! Damn it! Raccoon King's expression kept changing. In the end, he gritted his teeth and growled. All the fur on his body contracted, and his forehead cracked open. A pink, fleshy worm crawled out. This worm was as thick as a baby's arm and was 2 to 3 meters long. Even with Raccoon King's huge demonized head, he could only barely accommodate the worm's body. There was a thin mucous membrane outside the worm's body. It was like a slippery liquid. After the worm crawled out, the mucus on its body also fell off. After it fell to the ground, its body twisted a few times and sweat-like mucus overflowed from its body to form a protective film. I can't intervene in this battle anymore. I can only leave it to them. I hope they can completely strangle this ice demon embryo. The pink worm turned its head and glanced at the battle in the direction of Candle Dragon Lord. It looked at the besieged Dean. There was a trace of unwillingness in its eyes. It twisted its body and merged into the metal wall. It left the underground base and came to the surface. There's still that damn desolate magic puppet in the dark. I don't have a body, so I have to leave quickly. After the pink worm appeared on the ground, for narrow cracks appeared on its head. There were blood-red eyes inside. The pink worm vigilantly scanned the surroundings. After seeing that there was no danger, it immediately rushed towards one of the cracks. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept over and swept up the pink devil bug that was speeding away. A slender and pale hand strangled the pink devil bug. The owner of the hand was wearing a black robe with dark gold trimmings and a huge hood. His face was hidden in the shadows, but the tip of his nose was extremely white. "Flame worm, where are you going? Why did you abandon your body?" The black-robed man's voice was soft, and there was a hint of ridicule in it. The pink worm was so scared that its 4 eyes widened, and it screamed, "Let me go, and let Candle Dragon Lord know that you violated the agreement. He will definitely start a war with your devil kingdom. It's fine as long as he doesn't know." The black-robed man gently smiled and pulled down the hood on his head, revealing an incomparably handsome face with a hint of melancholy. His face was impeccably handsome and perfect. At this moment, there was a smile at the corner of his mouth. He suddenly opened his mouth, and in an instant his mouth was 1/2 meter wide. His originally beautiful white teeth, in an instant, turned into a mouth full of ferocious sharp teeth. Chapter 1172. In a corner of the second floor of the base, Dean noticed that the Raccoon King had withdrawn from the battle circle, so he didn't pay attention to it. He focused on dealing with the White Tiger King and the Scorpion King. His sharp blade attack was close to the White Tiger King, but it passed through its body without touching anything. It seemed that the White Tiger King was just a phantom, but the fierce attack and killing intent was by no means illusory. It was the first time that Dean had encountered such a strange ability. It could be said that it was the first time that he had fought against a king on the second floor of the base. Whether it was the Raccoon King's strange poison or the White Tiger King's strange illusory ability, he had never heard of it before. It was extremely rare, even among the 5-star legendary monsters. Moreover, it had become unique after the king's in-depth study and improvement. The White Tiger King jumped in front of Dean. It seemed that it had passed through the sharp blade, but it was menacing. The White Tiger King's sharp claws slapped on Dean's shoulder. The shoulder had turned into an oval shell with 7 or 8 ferocious short thorns on its surface. The White Tiger King's claws pierced through the short thorns. Dean was surprised, but he felt a huge force coming from his shoulder. His whole body flew backward and hit the floor of the room. The ground was able to withstand his huge body, but there were no signs of cracking at all. Even when his sharp blade scratched the ground, it only left shallow cracks. Unless he stabbed with all his strength, it was impossible to make a deep hole. It was obvious how hard the metal in this room was. "What's going on?" Dean quickly stood up from the ground and looked at the White Tiger King. There was some shock in his eyes. He clearly saw the claws pass through the short thorns on his shoulder like a phantom, but how could it hit his shoulder? Moreover, the White Tiger King's strength was extremely fierce. He felt that it could crush him in terms of brute force. Whether it was Splitter, Sun Beast, Turtle Shell, Poison Queen, or other magic marks, none of them were power-type magic marks. Sun Beast was a long-range energy-type soulworm, Splitter was an extreme attack type, an agile assassin type, and the rest were either defensive type, perceptive type, or poison type. The only thing lacking was a powerful power-type soulworm. He suddenly found that his strength was about half of that of the other kings. The White Tiger King's eyes flashed with a dignified look as he saw Dean quickly climb up. His attack was not a trivial matter, as it directly penetrated the surface of Dean's shoulder and hit his flesh. It could be said that it could ignore all defenses. Coupled with the violent power of the White Tiger King, few people could withstand his attack. Even the king who was good at defense would lose his advantage in front of the White Tiger King, because his phantom ability was specialized in defense-type warriors. At this time, the Scorpion King saw that Dean was repelled and immediately seized the opportunity to attack. But as soon as it got close, it was blocked by Dean's flame blades. The White Tiger King frowned as he saw the layers of flame blades that Dean had set up again. His phantom ability could penetrate the flame blades, but it would cause damage to his body. This was the reason why he didn't attack when he saw Dean use this move to defend. He wanted to wait for the poison of the Raccoon King to take effect. Who would have thought that the Raccoon King was just an idiot? He wasn't able to poison the White Tiger King to death. This person is a bit strange. He's good at several abilities: flame energy, blade attack, stone skin defense, poison. I don't know what else he can do. We should finish him as soon as possible to avoid any accidents." The White Tiger King turned to the Scorpion King and said. The Scorpion King smiled bitterly. "You can get close with a phantom ability, but I don't know how to deal with his rogue defense." "I know. Give me your strength. I'll try to kill him in one blow," the White Tiger King said in a deep voice. The Scorpion King saw that the White Tiger was ready to attack. He said, "Well, go ahead." The White Tiger King felt that his body was a lot lighter. He took a deep breath and let out a tiger roar. He rushed towards Dean's flame blades. Whoosh! The moment he got close, his body directly penetrated the flame blades. Dean's pupils shrank as he saw the White Tiger King jump into the flame shield. Although he expected and worried, he didn't think that it would really happen. The opponent's ability was too strange. Fortunately, he was prepared. The remaining blades fiercely stabbed towards the White Tiger King. Whoosh! 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 The sharp blades penetrated the White Tiger King's body, but they didn't hit. Dean's face changed. He wanted to pull back, but it was too late. The White Tiger King's speed was more than twice as fast as before. In the blink of an eye, the White Tiger King was in front of him. The target of the attack was the head. "No!" Dean roared. A lot of sharp blades grew out of his head. They crazily rose and stabbed toward the tiger's claw. He retreated, but the White Tiger King was faster. Dean's body flew out. The blades that were waving suddenly stopped. They collided with each other and cut off each other. Dean's body fell to the ground and didn't move for a long time. The White Tiger King was relieved as he looked at the ground. He couldn't use his phantom ability too much. Moreover, his body was in unbearable pain as he passed through the flame blades. "I'll eat him." The Scorpion King saw that Dean didn't move, so he quickly crawled over. He had just climbed to Dean's side, and his scorpion tail was bent, ready to give the last stab. Suddenly, he screamed, and his body bounced back like lightning. At the same time, some of the blades scattered on the ground were raised like willow branches and suddenly stabbed. However, the Scorpion King dodged in advance and was not hit. Even so, he was scared and broke out in cold sweat. He had experienced the sharpness of the blades. If he didn't react quickly, he would have been cut into pieces. Although he wouldn't die, he would be seriously injured. Not dead, the White Tiger King was a bit shocked as he saw the scene. Dean slowly stood up, feeling the concussion in his brain. He couldn't help but have a lingering fear. If he hadn't turned his brain into stone and transferred part of the memory to his neck, he would have been dead by now. However, after this blow, he knew the opponent's ability. Chapter 1173. Do you think you are very powerful because I didn't kill you? White Tiger King sneered at Dean's provocation, but his heart slowly sank. He knew that Dean had guessed the characteristics of his ability. Moreover, Dean had mastered energy ability. If he used energy ability as a defense, then the next attack would be very difficult. The corner of Dean's mouth curved into a smile. His whole body suddenly burned with raging flames. He was like dry firewood under a bonfire, curled up in the flames. The strong fire covered his body thickly. White Tiger King's face sank as he saw this. He took a deep breath and said to the Scorpion King, "He has seen through my ability. I will leave the rest to you." The Scorpion King nodded. He had some understanding of White Tiger King's ability. He knew that White Tiger King wasn't deliberately hiding his strength. Generally speaking, a king could defeat another king, but it was very difficult to kill one. Moreover, the Scorpion King felt that White Tiger King was a bit strange. He had a variety of different abilities. If White Tiger King focused on defense, then they would be helpless for a while. Dean looked at the Scorpion King next to him. The strange force field around the Scorpion King's body made him vigilant. He secretly turned his skin and bones into stone. Then he tried to decompose the genes on a sharp blade, just like White Tiger King's illusion ability. Dean didn't see any clues when White Tiger King attacked several times. But when he finally understood the ability of the White Tiger King, he knew that it was difficult to see the special ability of the White Tiger King. He couldn't even see whether the White Tiger King used his ability or not. The gap was too short to capture. At the moment of attack, the genes of the whole body are separated like water. Dean's eyes flashed. This time he couldn't use his X-ray vision to observe the genes. He could only try to understand the composition of the opponent's ability. When science entered the quantum field, it had been proved that whether it was human or other creatures, they weren't actually a whole. It was like a person made of sand. It seemed to be a whole body, but it was composed of countless sand grains. There were naturally gaps in it. But humans didn't turn into sand because of the biological magnetic field in their bodies. Dean was glad that he was a modern person, so he was able to quickly think of the particularity and structure of the white tiger's ability. Other kings who didn't have enough scientific knowledge wouldn't be able to figure it out. They would only define it as magical. Most of the kings liked to fight and politics. Only a few of them would study scientific knowledge. Control the magnetic field in the body to control the separation of the body for a short time. At the moment of being attacked, his body will become like countless loose particles, becoming like an illusory shadow, dodging the attack. However, energy attacks won't work. Flames can burn everything big and small. Even water can be burned dry, and no matter how sharp a knife is, it can't cut through water. That's why he's immune to my sharp blade attack. But he'll be burned by the flames. Dean's eyes flashed. Although he knew the White Tiger King's ability, but the key to this step was to control the biological magnetic field. Suddenly, he thought of another thing. What would happen if he shrank the density of his body infinitely? There is a lot of space in the cells of a living being. What would happen if these spaces were shrunk? Would the body become smaller? This was for sure. But in addition to the body becoming smaller, what difference would there be? Thinking of this, Dean was eager to try. For a king, the ability was a kind of potential development of the body. The ability was ever-changing, but it all originated from the body. Developing the body was equal to developing the ability. Dean did it. While protecting himself with the flame, he controlled the sharp blades to set up a round shield. Then he controlled several sharp blades to feel the tiny units in the sharp blades. Then he felt the force field between these tiny units. It didn't take too much time. Just like raising his hand, he quickly felt the force field between the tiny units in the sharp blade. However, when he wanted to control this force field, he found it extremely difficult. First of all, controlling these tiny units made him feel like he couldn't exert any strength. It was like an ordinary person controlling their ears. He felt like his strength couldn't be transmitted to them at all. The sharp blades don't have my nerves. It's too difficult to control them. Let's try my arm. Dean gave up continuing to control the sharp blades. Instead, he felt the tiny units and the force field on his arm. This time, the speed was faster. He immediately felt the countless tiny cells on his arm moving slowly. He tried to control some of these cells and soon control their actions. Dean's eyes lit up. He slowly tried to control the force field on his arm. After 2 minutes, he slowly controlled the force field to separate a gap in the middle of his arm. He used a sharp blade on his back to cut down and aimed at the gap in the force field on his arm. He saw that the sharp blade went into the gap, but there was no feeling of touching an object. There was also no blood. Success. Dean was a little surprised. He pulled out the sharp blade and saw that there was no change in his arm. There seemed to be no crack, but only he could feel that a part of the force field in the middle was separated. Sure enough, his ability is like this. Dean was a little excited. He tried to control all parts of his body. After 4 or 5 minutes, he could separate the force field on his feet, chest, neck, and other parts, including his head. But after the force field of the brain was separated, his thoughts would fall into a moment of confusion, as if his reaction was suddenly slow. After repeated attempts, Dean's excitement gradually faded. Although he mastered the ability of the White Tiger King in less than 10 minutes, he found that it was very difficult to use it as skillfully as the White Tiger King. He needed a lot of time to practice. His current fastest speed was more than 30 seconds to separate a part of the force field. But the White Tiger King was able to separate the force field in less than 0.01 seconds, and the whole body was separated at the same time. He can penetrate into my body while separating the force field. There must be a way. Dean fell into thought. The ability of the White Tiger King was not as easy to copy as that of the Raccoon King. It needed to be studied and a lot of time to practice. He thought for a moment without any results, so he temporarily stopped thinking about it. Instead, he thought about the previous idea of compressing the space in his body. He immediately tried to shrink the space between the cells so that the cell membrane tightly wrapped around the nucleus. Chapter 1174. The smaller the body, the bigger the world. In Dean's line of sight, the size of the White Tiger King and the Scorpion King was constantly growing. The vast metal room was also enlarging. He felt that his body had shrunk to twice its original size. Then he stopped compressing his body. He found that the force field inside his body had become more solid. It was more difficult to separate the force field. But the splitting blade that extended out of his body didn't shrink because the structure of the blade wasn't a body cell. Plus, the neurons inside were weak. There seems to be no change. Dean tried to move forward, but he didn't feel any difference. The White Tiger King and the Scorpion King, who were outside the fire shield, thought that Dean was going to take the initiative to attack. They slowly retreated and waited for Dean to exhaust himself or reveal a flaw. "What are you doing?" At this time, a figure rushed over. It was a snake monster with a human head and many arms. There were incomplete wings on its back. At the moment, the end of its tail was twisting and peeling off a layer of broken skin. "Be careful. This person's ability is strange and changeable," the Scorpion King warned. The snake monster looked at the fire shield. Its vertical pupils seemed to penetrate through the flame to see Dean. It was surprised when it saw Dean's body. It was about to open its mouth. Suddenly, there was a burst of roar from the distance. It was the hoarse roar of the undead. The snake monster turned its head and looked. Its face slightly changed. It immediately said to the other two, "Kill him immediately. The Candle Dragon King can only contain the undead. We need to kill it." The White Tiger King and the Scorpion King turned their heads to look at the battlefield in front of the mainframe. They found that there were two kings who had abandoned their demonic bodies. Their demonic bodies were resurrected like puppets. They showed far more violent fighting power than before. They were besieging the Candle Dragon King. Damn! The White Tiger King's face was ugly. He turned his head to look at the fire shield that was slowly approaching. There was a trace of cruelty in his eyes. He rushed over. The moment he got close to the fire shield, his body suddenly turned illusory. Dean knew that White Tiger King was going to use the same trick again. He sneered in his heart. The flames on the blade shrank, and the temperature dropped in an instant. The sun beast could control heat, and the change in temperature allowed it to control flames and ice. At this moment, it was rapidly absorbing heat. The flames disappeared, and the temperature dropped to negative 100 degrees Celsius. Furthermore, it was still rapidly absorbing heat. In theory, it could control its sharp blade to add an absolute zero cold domain. However, it was very difficult to do it to such an extent. It was like a normal person lifting a 200-pound boulder. Whoosh! The White Tiger King's figure passed through the sharp blades, but the cold air that emerged from the blades enveloped the White Tiger King's body. In the next moment, more sharp blades followed. The White Tiger King's pupils constricted, and its face was full of shock. It hurriedly tried to separate its body to escape, but it discovered that the cells in its body had been frozen by the cold air, and its movements had become sluggish. The speed at which it could control its body had clearly become slower. No! The White Tiger King raised its sharp claws, and a metallic luster appeared all over its body. Its fur tensed up as it resisted the bombardment of sharp blades. Puff, puff, puff. The sharp blades pierced into the White Tiger King's body. The sound of flesh being pierced and bones being cut was heard. However, the White Tiger King's body was like a fallen leaf as it fell to the ground. A lot of blood sputtered out of its body. Its head had been pierced 7 or 8 times by the sharp blades. If it wasn't for its tenacious vitality, it would have been dead by now. Damn! Seeing this scene, the Scorpion King and Snake King's expressions changed, and they were both shocked and furious. They quickly rushed up and blocked the incoming blades and dragged the White Tiger King back. Even so, the Scorpion King's body was pierced by 4 or 5 sharp blades. The Snake King's tail was cut in two. The cut surface was neat, but the pain of the cut made it grit its teeth. What is this thing? How can it be so sharp? The Snake King dragged the White Tiger King, who was bleeding all over his body. He was surprised and angry as he looked at the distant Dean. Although the White Tiger King's attack was very sharp, he didn't think that his strengthened scales would be unable to resist it. It must be known that the Snake King's scales could resist missiles and even bounce off laser weapons and bullets. The surface of the scales was unusually smooth. Ordinary blades and claws would slide off when they hit it. The Snake King had played the snake's scales to the extreme. He didn't expect that it would be cut off by Dean's sharp blade. It was simply terrifying. In fact, even Dean himself didn't realize that he had played the splitter's blade to the extreme. The sharpness of the blade had been strengthened to the extreme. It was beyond the level of a 3-star legendary monster. "Quick, let go of him!" The Scorpion King screamed. The Snake King looked down and was aghast. He quickly let go of the White Tiger King. He saw that the wounds on the White Tiger King's body hadn't healed. The blood that was flowing out of his body had turned from bright red to black. It exuded an extremely unpleasant stench. The White Tiger King's snow-white fur had been dyed black. In just a few breaths, the black had spread to his whole body. "Is the blade poisonous?" The Snake King screamed and quickly swam away from the White Tiger King. He suddenly remembered that he had been stabbed by the blade. His face turned ugly. His arms suddenly turned into a scimitar and fiercely chopped at the place where the White Tiger King's tail was cut off. Blood gushed out of the cut, but soon his muscles tightened to stop the bleeding. He saw that the red flesh inside the cut-off part of the tail had black spots that quickly expanded. If he had been a little bit slower, then he would have cut off more of the snake's body. He broke out in a cold sweat. If it wasn't for his habit of separating the flesh and blood around the wound from his body, the poison would have flowed through his body along with his blood. Thinking of this, he looked at the Scorpion King next to him. He saw that the Scorpion King had already removed its shell. He couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. At the same time, he sullenly said, "He is such a terrifying poison. Why didn't you say so earlier?" I also didn't expect that he could suddenly injure the Mirage King. The Scorpion King smiled bitterly. At this time, the forehead of the White Tiger King on the ground cracked open, and an insect covered in flames crawled out. Some of the flames were black, and as soon as the insect crawled out, it bounced to the side. Suddenly, its body shook violently, and in the next moment, one end of the flame insect broke open, and an even smaller flame insect crawled out. It quickly crawled to the side, raised its head like a poisonous snake, and a shrill voice came from the flames. "My demon body is useless. I can't help you here. I'll retreat first." The Scorpion King and the Snake King looked at him with complicated eyes. A trace of greed flashed in the depths of their eyes, but they were restrained. The Scorpion King whispered, "You go. Be careful." Chapter 1175. We can't deal with him with just the two of us. After the flaming devil bug left the White Tiger King's body, the Scorpion King sighed at the Snake King beside him. He has mastered at least 3 ultimate abilities: temperature control, sharp blades, and this poison. If he focuses on defense, it will be very difficult for us to hurt him. Snake King's face turned ugly. Although he had his own unique abilities, but Dean's 3 abilities were equally tricky to deal with. Not to mention that Dean had mastered 3 abilities at the same time. Snake King was tangled as he knew that it would be too much of a loss if he admitted defeat. Moreover, the pressure on Candle Dragon Lord had doubled because of him. It was tantamount to a double loss. Go! Suddenly, a roar came from behind. The Snake King and the Scorpion King trembled and glanced at the battlefield behind them, only to see that the Candle Dragon Master was covered in blood, and the fire that engulfed him was even more intense than before. He was holding a nine-tailed cat monster in his claws and suddenly threw out a ball of flames, knocking away a pitch-black humanoid figure. Then, he turned around and rushed to the dome of the metal room above his head, quickly disappearing into it. What? The Scorpion King and the Snake King were shocked. They didn't expect that Candle Dragon Lord would be defeated. At this time, they noticed that in addition to the undead in the distance, there were three huge demonic bodies beside it. Each demonic body was like a huge and terrifying monster. Their foreheads were broken and their bodies were exuding the aura of death. All eyes were focused on them as Candle Dragon Lord left. Their hearts jumped. They didn't dare to stay for a moment. They quickly shrank their demonic bodies and drilled into the metal wall above their heads. Want to leave? Dean noticed the situation in the distance. He saw that the two were also ready to leave. He immediately made a move. His body was covered with ice as he cut towards the Snake King, who was closest to him. The Snake King was shocked. It turned around and spat out a black mist. The black mist corroded Dean's blade and melted it. The edge of the blade became blunt. Using the poisonous fog as a distraction, the Snake King quickly shed its skin and plunged into the metal wall. On the other side, the Scorpion King released a small scorpion from its hard shell. It quickly crawled into the metal wall and disappeared as if it had sunk into a silver swamp. Dean was a little regretful that he couldn't stop them, but he also saw a king's ability to escape. It was really difficult to chase and kill them. Otherwise, even if they couldn't defeat him, there was a great possibility that they could escape. Roar! At this time, a hoarse roar came from the front, filled with malevolence and brutality. Dean was shocked. He saw the humanoid undead approaching him. The three king demons behind it had been infected and turned into undead monsters. Their pupils exuded a bloodthirsty color, and their bodies had the rotten smell of the undead. Lin Changsheng. Dean took a deep breath. I know you can control it, but don't forget that I can too. You said that if I helped you drive away Candle Dragon Lord, you would tell me how to deal with the undead. Now that Candle Dragon Lord has left, it's time for you to fulfill your promise. The terrifying undead suddenly stopped as he spoke. Its hideous face was still staring at Dean. It seemed that it was restraining something. At the same time, a beam of light shot over from afar, and Lin Changsheng's figure appeared in it. He looked no different from a real person, and it was his illusory projection. He wore an exquisite azure suit and looked very polite. He smiled and said, I said that we forced Candle Dragon Lord to retreat, but he didn't retreat. He just left this place and returned to the surface. In a while, he will join forces with that demon emperor to make a comeback. They won't miss this opportunity, and my black wind alone isn't enough to defeat the two of them. At that time, I will need your help. Dean was furious. You are going back on your words. You can think that way if you want. Lin Changsheng smiled. Dean clenched his fists. Aren't you afraid that I will join forces with them to deal with you? Anyway, I can't resist the two of them. It doesn't make any difference if you join us. Since we're going to die, then we will perish together. Lin Changsheng said indifferently. Dean clenched his teeth. His heart was incomparably angry. He knew that Lin Changsheng had grasped his weak point. Although he knew that the possibility of Lin Changsheng mastering the solution to the undead was extremely small, but he wanted to vent his anger as he thought of Aisha, who was wandering in the unknown wilderness at the moment. He wanted to vent his anger, but he endured it. After a moment of silence, Dean looked at Lin Changsheng. If they come again, then I will help you to contain Candle Dragon Lord. If you go back on your words, then no one can save you. Lin Changsheng indifferently said, I always mean what I say. Dean turned around. It seemed that he was too lazy to listen to him. He slowly walked to the end of the room. His body merged into the wall and disappeared. There won't be a next time. Lin Changsheng's eyes flashed a trace of killing intent as he looked at Dean's disappearing figure. But soon he restored his indifference, and his figure gradually faded away. The ferocious zombie suddenly growled and pounced on the two demon kings on the ground, tearing them apart. On the ground, Torch Dragon Lord tossed the nine-tailed cat to the side after he came out. Then he saw the Scorpion King and the Snake King crawling out from the ground. His expression was ugly. He didn't expect that not only did they not injure Lin Changsheng, they even lost 4 of their generals. He slowly released his demonic body, and his body returned to human form. The other 3 kings also released their demonic bodies upon seeing this. They looked at each other, and their expressions were a little ugly. You didn't deal with the Federation King? Candle Dragon Lord looked at the Scorpion and Snake Kings with gloomy eyes. The Serpentine King's heart skipped a beat. He smiled bitterly and said, Torch Dragon Lord, I just arrived there, but before I could do anything, the Mirage King was already taken care of by that brat. That brat is a little strange. He has mastered several extreme abilities. The Scorpion King quickly said, Candle Dragon Lord, this king is not worse than the Light King under the Demon Emperor. We are really not his match. He easily killed the Phantom King. The corner of the Candle Dragon Lord's mouth twitched slightly. He wanted to curse, but he held it in. He knew the strength of the Phantom King. Among the many kings of the Fire Dragon country, he was one of the stronger ones. The fact that the latter could kill the Phantom King in such a short period of time showed that he was not to be underestimated. Whoosh! At this time, a black shadow came from afar and landed in front of them. What's wrong? You failed? The figure landed. It was a black-robed young man. The hood on his head was swept away by the wind, revealing a handsome face. His slender eyebrows were a bit melancholy. He looked like a noble young master in the garden. Chapter 1176. Humph! Candle Dragon Lord snorted and said, This Lin Changsheng has lived for more than 200 years and is the oldest god embryo. He is indeed difficult to deal with. If it weren't for your concerns, we would have destroyed his mechanical heart just now. The black-robed young man raised his eyebrows slightly and said indifferently, Why? Brother Candle Dragon, are you venting your anger on me? We agreed beforehand that I would guard the outside to prevent him from detonating the nuclear bomb, and you would lead the attack. Now that you have failed, is it my fault? Candle Dragon Lord's expression was ugly. He was indeed the one who suggested this, but the reason was that he was worried that if the Demon Emperor attacked and Lin Changsheng was killed by him, the mechanical heart would fall into his hands. This thing was a technological item created by the extraterrestrial demonic insects and was extremely precious. In other words, controlling the mechanical heart was equivalent to controlling half of the Federation's power. Their goal was not to kill Lin Changsheng, but to take the Federation from his hands and get rid of Lin Changsheng, a great enemy. It was a gift along the way. However, this Lin Changsheng was indeed an old monster who had lived for more than 200 years. He did not expect that he had cultivated such a terrifying walking corpse that was close to the limit of life. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a physical origami. This matter has exceeded my expectations. The only thing we can do now is to attack together. Candle Dragon Lord did not refute the Demon Emperor's words. He suppressed the anger in his heart and said in a deep voice, This Lin Changsheng old dog has cultivated a walking corpse that is close to the limit of life. Who knows how much blood, flesh, and virus crystals he has fed it. He has also cultivated a powerful king. Now, 3 kings have been infected by that walking corpse and have become its corpse puppets. Before I left, I saw 2 demonic bodies on the ground. I guess they have also become the corpse puppets of that walking corpse. Although he does not have the mechanical warriors, the power he has now is not much weaker than us. It is almost impossible for me to destroy that mechanical heart alone. The Demon Emperor frowned and said, If I go in and force him into a corner, he will detonate the nuclear bomb and die with us. Who will stop me? Candle Dragon Lord said, Don't you still have a few kings on the front line? Just transfer them over. The Demon Emperor shook his head and said, We need them on the front line. The Demon Emperor shook his head and said, We need them to restrain him at the front lines. We have to think about this carefully. I don't think it's safe to counterattack now. Now that our position has been exposed, there's no need for us to hide anymore. We've already figured out Lin Changsheng's trump cards. What's next is a battle of attrition. He's entrenched in this mech city, which is his heart. We can send people to guard this place and restrain him here. Then, the rest will follow me to take down the Federation. Once we have complete control over it, we won't have to worry about anything else. We can also attack with our army and use all our strength to destroy him. Candle Dragon Lord thought for a moment and said, "Then, who do you? Who? Who will stay here, and who will you?" The Demon Emperor said indifferently, "In my opinion, Brother Candle Dragon has fought with that zombie and has experience in dealing with it. Staying here is the most suitable. I can go and reclaim the Federation. After unifying the Federation, the Alliance army will come to help." Candle Dragon Lord sneered and said, "According to what you said, doesn't that mean I will be your guard and hold Lin Chongqing back? Then you can swallow the Federation and take all the fruits of your labor for nothing?" The Demon Emperor raised his brows and said, "That is not what I mean. After the Federation is reclaimed, we will follow the previous rules and split it 50 to 50. Moreover, the Federation's true power is the mechanical heart. That thing is in Lin Chongqing's hands. You will guard the mechanical heart. Are you afraid that the entire Federation will fall into my hands? Although the mechanical heart is powerful, it is still a dead machine. You have reclaimed the Federation with billions of citizens. If you integrate them into the civilians of your empire, it will be enough to bring you benefits no less than the mechanical heart." Candle Dragon Lord said coldly, "I will go and reclaim the Federation. You stay here and hold Lin Chongqing back. If you are unwilling, then forget it. I have already helped once. I have done my part." The Demon Emperor frowned and was silent for a moment. He nodded and said, "All right, then I will stay here and guard this old dog." Seeing that he had agreed, Candle Dragon Lord secretly heaved a sigh of relief and said, "Since that is the case, there is no time to lose. I will leave first. Send a message to your subordinates to avoid any misunderstandings." The Demon Emperor nodded slightly. Candle Dragon Lord immediately led the three kings away and disappeared into the horizon. The Demon Emperor looked at their departing figures and narrowed his eyes. A cold glint flashed in his eyes as he turned back to look at the underground base. A zombie that has evolved to the limits of its physical body? If I eat it, I wondered to what extent I will evolve. Perhaps I can reach the height of my father? In another corner of the underground base, a black shadow emerged from the metal floor. It was like a shadow that was elongated when sunlight shone on an object on the ground. It was extremely well hidden. There was no heat source, smell, or sound. Two dark golden pupils suddenly emerged from the dark shadow and scanned the surroundings. In the blink of an eye, it was thousands of meters away from the place. It went straight all the way. The surrounding ground was empty and there were no buildings to hide. Most of them had been razed to the ground by the nuclear bomb. The ground was still hot and cracked. Dean saw the broken buildings after a dozen miles. They were twisted and crumbling in the high temperature. The empty windows were like the eye sockets of a skeleton. It was full of silence. Dean went forward for another dozen miles and came to a dilapidated supermarket building to hide. Dean checked the surroundings and confirmed that there was no one. He took out his watch and was surprised to see that Lin Chongqing didn't call him. Did it mean that Candle Dragon Lord and the others didn't counterattack? In his opinion, after Master Candle Dragon and the others escaped from the underground base, they would definitely return. Moreover, they might even bring the Demon Emperor who was guarding outside and the other kings under the Demon Emperor's command to attack. After all, their purpose in coming to the Federation was to destroy Lin Chongqing. If they retreated because of a mere walking corpse, wouldn't the alliance of the two countries become a joke? Lin Chongqing didn't call me to help. It seems that they don't intend to counterattack for the time being. Dean pondered for a moment. He felt that the calm was only temporary. He could seize the opportunity to absorb the new abilities he learned in the underground base. Chapter 1177. Although the devil and the two dragon lords had divine physiques and could evolve quickly and learn new abilities but there was a difference in strength between them. The more abilities one grasped, the higher the pinnacle, the closer one's body would be to perfection, and the closer one would be to an omnipotent God. However, no matter how deep the accumulation of the devil and the two dragon lords was, they were far less than Lin Changsheng. With Lin Changsheng's IQ and the knowledge he learned from the Cortex Prime for more than 200 years, he would be able to evolve countless abilities once he got the divine physique. His knowledge reserves were far beyond anyone in the world. If Dean didn't have a heart defect, then Lin Changsheng's consciousness would have developed his body to the level of a god. He would have become the first person in the world. And this was also the reason why the Demon Emperor and the two Dragon Masters didn't ally with Lin Changsheng and instead joined forces with each other. Among them, Lin Changsheng posed the greatest threat and was difficult to match. Unfortunately, when I defeated Lin Changsheng's consciousness, I didn't know that my body had such a rapid evolution characteristic. His consciousness also didn't have the thought of developing the various abilities of my body in advance. Otherwise, with his thoughts reminding me, I would have realized it as well. Presumably, to him, obtaining my body was the most important step. As for how to develop it, he didn't even need to think about it. Right now, his memories are gradually settling down, and I have forgotten quite a lot of them and have sunk into the depths of my mind. If I could obtain Crimson Moon's ability and flip through my own memories, I would be able to completely dig out his memories and use the advanced knowledge in his memories to stimulate all kinds of potential in my body. But right now, I can only use the knowledge that I remember to stimulate my body. Dean controlled his body to familiarize himself with the phantom ability of the White Tiger King while recalling Lin Changsheng's memories. Genetic energy storage, cell fusion reactor. A large amount of advanced knowledge emerged in Dean's mind. All of them came from Lin Changsheng's biological research. Terra's Consortium and Locke Consortium focused on the mystery of undead and monsters' body. No matter which one belonged to the biological category, they had a thorough understanding of the biological structure. All of these research data were stored in the host computer and also in Lin Changsheng's brain. Although the biological knowledge in Lin Changsheng's consciousness was incomplete, but there was still some complete knowledge. Some of them were missing due to forgetting, but the rest was still rich enough for Dean to study for a while. Split brain cells, split personality. Dean used Lin Changsheng's knowledge to split the cavernous body in his mind. He copied the memory into two parts. Soon, a head grew from his shoulder. But the structure of the head was rough. It had simple eyes, nose, and ears. There were no eyebrows. The skin color was very strange. It was yellowish like his skin. At this moment, the mouth opened and a sharp voice came out. "It's a success." Dean looked at the second brain on his shoulder. The thinking seems to be connected and the memory can be shared. It seems that two of me are thinking at the same time. If that's the case, my thinking ability can be doubled. The second brain on his shoulder took over the conversation, but its voice was shrill, as if its vocal cords were not fully developed. Dean didn't carefully construct the second brain. After all, he would have to take it back into his body. It was impossible to use two heads to wander around all the time. The three-headed and six-armed deity in ancient myths was just a figment of the ancients' imagination. I didn't expect that after the cataclysm, by relying on evolution and the control of genes, one could really achieve this step. In fact, it's far beyond this. Dean murmured. He felt that his body was becoming less and less like a human's. He felt that he was gradually turning into a monster when he entered the demonic body. But now he had a deeper understanding and control of genes. He felt that he was getting closer and closer to God. The Bible said that God had no face, no body, no image. God was the Lord of Almighty. He felt that it was not wrong. He could change his facial bones and body at will. He didn't need to be fixed to a specific image. The definition of body was not as narrow as the human definition. Moreover, he could even change his body. He didn't need oxygen, light, and heat. He didn't need to eat. He could regrow his fingers like the ice worm. He could survive in any harsh environment. It is said that God, is omnipotent. My current body is close to that of God. If I become an omnipotent God, I don't know. Can I help her solve the undead virus? Dean thought of Aisha. He felt the urgency of time again. He restrained his thoughts and no longer wasted time imagining. He began to seriously conceive and practice his ability. His second brain controlled part of his body to practice the phantom ability of the White Tiger King. His main brain used Lin Chongqing's knowledge to control another part of his body to practice the new ability. It could be regarded as independent development. I use the Sun Beast ability to absorb heat. This heat is stored in my body, but it can't be used well. I can open a core in my cells to store heat. This heat can be converted into my physical strength and kinetic energy. It can also be gathered together and compressed into light energy. Dean thought while controlling his body to convert slowly. He completely analyzed the red crystal structure on the forehead of the Sun Beast ability. He used this structure to cover his whole body. He slowly constructed a blood-red crystal armor on the surface of his body. It was as smooth as scales. Then he released the heat stored in his body through the crystal. Puff, puff. All the blood-red crystal scales on his body shot out beams of light. Because it was his first attempt, he injected less heat. The light emitted was extremely weak. It was as thin as a needle. It flashed and almost didn't cause any substantial damage. If I can compress the heat to an extreme point, I can emit high-intensity rays. Yes, I can use the refraction method to enhance the power. Previously, only the crystal on my forehead couldn't refract, but this time it's different. Dean's eyes became brighter and brighter. Every time he thought of an idea and succeeded, it meant that his strength would take a big step forward. Soon, he constructed a complex, three-dimensional prism inside the red crystal so that the heat rays could be refracted inside the crystal. The limit of this process was 9 times, and the power was increased more than 10 times. After the internal refraction of the crystal was released, Dean let the surface of the crystal grow a concave crystal. The released rays hit the concave crystal and were refracted again. Bang! A stone at his feet was penetrated. Dean looked at the finger-thick hole that was penetrated. There was some shock in his eyes. The heat he used was not high, and there was no difference from the previous one, but the result was very different. Previously, when the same heat was shot on the stone, it was like a light breeze, and there was no trace left. But this time, it directly penetrated the finger-thick hole, and it was just a reconstruction of the crystal. Chapter 1178. When I accidentally saw the hot news, I was stunned. I thought it was fake until I searched Baidu on Baidu and found out it was real. My feelings are indescribable. Jin Yong can be said to be my favorite author. The other is Gu Long. Only these two can make me love and admire them. When I was a teenager, I did not understand them. But when I started to like web novels, I read their books when there was a shortage of books, and I slowly understood them. After that, I started to love them. From love to admiration to respect, and finally to amazement. It is like an extinct work of art, unsurpassable and still existing in this world. It is so beautiful. Now, many people know about Jin Yong and Gu Long through television dramas. But only after reading their original works and tasting the flavor of their works do you know how powerful and great they are. It is not just a wuxia novel. On the internet, many people analyze how good Jin Yong's books are, how clever the plots are, and how lively the characters are. But these are not the most important, because only those who have written novels will know the greatness and importance of Jin Yong and Gu Long. Without them, it is hard to imagine what television dramas people in the 90s will watch. Without them, those famous Hong Kong superstars will not be able to debut. Without their books, today's web novels will be greatly reduced. This influence is unparalleled. It is not just because they're ancient and unparalleled, but because they are classics and unparalleled. In the past, there were only a handful of such monumental authors. For them to appear in the future, it will be extremely difficult. Many people might not understand, and feel that it is exaggerated. But with a few examples, everyone will understand. After Gu Long passed away, Jin Yong closed himself off, and from then on, wuxia declined. To put it simply, Jin Yong and Gu Long stopped writing novels, and the popular wuxia genre disappeared. After reading their books, people will not be able to continue reading wuxia novels. This is like when Xuanhuan was popular. Some god wrote all the cool points of Xuanhuan to the extreme, and then he stopped writing. From then on, Xuanhuan declined. No matter who wrote Xuanhuan, no one can continue reading it. Even if there's a little improvement, it is still insignificant. Obviously, this phenomenon is very difficult. Jin Yong's and Gu Long's books were all over the Chinese world. Although there was less entertainment in that era, it was not as little as people thought. Moreover, it was more difficult to disseminate things, but it was still popular among the people. Among the online novels of today, which one could reach such a level? He remembered that he had once written a novel about transmigrating to Jin Yong's novel. The novel did pretty well, but it was banned. And so, the readers kept cursing and criticizing Jin Yong, their mouths full of disdain. All I want to say is, whether it's the writing style, the plot, or the results, let alone a million votes, even if you had 10 times that number, it still wouldn't be comparable. In fact, it would be an insult to even compare. However, diehard fans would always be blinded by a single leaf. Sigh. Think about the past. It was also because he was young and frivolous. Coupled with his natural arrogance and stubbornness, he couldn't do well in many places. He didn't like to suck up to others, and he couldn't even bring himself to call him Brother Zhang, Brother Li, or Boss. He also rarely admired others. He never chased after stars and pursued perfectionism. If someone or something had a flaw, he would feel that it was not worthy of special appreciation. And most people, in my opinion, have their own shining points and flaws. So, I only thought highly of them or liked them. It's hard to imagine the fanaticism of a diehard fan. What kind of thoughts would they have if they were obsessed with someone or something and turned their 3 views upside down? Now, as he grew older, his temper slowly became more restrained. Thinking back to when he was young and saw the resumes of Jin Yong and Gu Long, and when he understood their achievements, he even thought about doing better than them in the future. He thought that if he were to write an online novel and write it to the point of winning a Nobel Prize, not only would it have to be vulgar, but it would also have to reach the depths of the soul. Of course, that was a very naive and ignorant fantasy. It wasn't until later that he understood more and more that he realized how extreme the achievements of the 2 masters were. Like Tai Chi, one complex and one simple, they completely occupied the space of wuxia. So, when they stopped writing, there was no more decent wuxia. That era seemed to have been sealed and could only be turned into nostalgia. Listening to ancient Cantonese songs in the quiet of the night, his thoughts surged, and he was moved by the taste. Ever since I was young, the only people that I sincerely admire are the 2 grandmasters. When I was young, I wanted to surpass them. Only when I grew up did I realize that some people can never be surpassed. Because what some people do is like a foundation. No matter how tall a building you build, it all stems from the firmness of this foundation. Maybe when you were born in the same era, you would be crushed in seconds. It was also this realization that made me learn to respect people who are worthy of respect. In this world, there are many people who are worthy of respect and have made great contributions. There are also many who are antisocial and like to get into a dead end. Every time I see them, I think of my past self. I was young and frivolous, always thinking that I was more awesome than anyone else, or that I would definitely be awesome in the future because I'd set a very awesome goal. But let's not talk about whether or not the awesome goal can be achieved. Even if it is achieved, it does not mean that others are not worthy of your respect. From the time you learn to respect others, maybe it is when you grow up. In the past, teachers often talked about the so-called arrogance and lofty character, but you never really understood it. It was only when you personally experienced it that you truly understood it. So here, I also want to tell those young readers to try to learn to respect those who do things that you can't. Respect doesn't mean that you are inferior to others. but it shows that you are sensible and mature. And when you do things that other youths can't do when you are young, it means that you have surpassed them. Unknowingly, I wrote a lot of words. Suddenly, I thought of the ancient dragon's words when he passed away. Chu Liuxiang was nowhere to be seen in the world, and Little Li's flying dagger was the best. And Master Jinyang's departure was also the best. The two most beloved masters in the world had left just like that. Sigh, what a pity. It felt like two very good teachers had left. Chapter 1179. On the front lines of the Federation army and the Empire army were engaged in a bloody battle. Corpses piled up like mountains, and blood flowed like rivers. Crimson Moon and the Radiant King were forced to retreat from the Federation city by the many Genesis god mechs, and retreated to the rear of the Empire army to rest. Although Crimson Moon had kidnapped the Federation president, it did not have much of an effect. The Federation's military power had already been divided by the four major financial groups. At this time, people also saw the hidden strength of the four major financial groups. The four major financial groups led their armies to fight the Empire army. Lin Changsheng mobilized the Genesis god mechs as reinforcements to restrain Crimson Moon and the Radiant King so that they did not dare to show their faces on the battlefield. This was the hinterland of the Federation after all, so there was no need to worry about energy supply. The artillery fire never stopped. On this day, people saw a golden red sky that they had never seen before. It was the color of artillery bombardment. The Empire army struggled to hold on. Large numbers of steam airships and land warships were destroyed at every moment. The battlefield was piled with all kinds of strange body parts. Most of the soldiers had died in their demon form, but the broken body parts still maintained the terrifying demon form, making the battlefield look like a demon purgatory in a different dimension. The Demon Emperor and the others have not succeeded yet. In the tent at the rear of the Empire army, the Radiant King looked at Crimson Moon, who was sitting boldly above. The latter was dressed in a blood-red robe, her beautiful face cold as if it was dyed with blood. The nuclear bomb has been launched. The Federation army's thermal weapons have stopped for a while. They should have been affected. They should be attacking the core machine by now. Let's wait a little longer. Crimson Moon's eyes were cold, and her voice was as cold as blood. The Radiant King nodded slightly and sighed. I didn't expect the Troll Federation to have so many king-level troll demons. Crimson Moon's expression was cold and unmoved. Although she was forced to come out by the Genesis god mechs, only she knew how much effort she had put in. Suddenly, the communicator on her wrist lit up. She looked at the name and frowned imperceptibly. She quickly picked up and said, "Your Majesty, are you done on your side? The Demon Emperor?" The Radiant King immediately pricked up his ears. "The Torch Dragon Master is going to meet up with you. You should cooperate with him to attack the Federation first. The Torch Dragon Master will tell you the specifics when he arrives." The Demon Emperor's tone was indifferent. He did not seem to like talking too much and hung up immediately. Fei Yu frowned slightly and pondered in silence. The Radiant King glanced at him nonchalantly and said with a smile, "It seems that His Majesty's plan seems to have gone awry, but it doesn't affect anything. When the Torch Dragon Master arrives, we can counterattack." A strange light flashed in the depths of Crimson Moon's eyes as she nodded. "That's right." Not long after, Candle Dragon Lord led the three kings to the barracks at the rear of the Imperial army and met with Crimson Moon and the Radiant King. Seeing that there were only the two of them here, he couldn't help but ask, "Only the two of you are left?" Fei Yu said indifferently, "Everyone else is dead." The three kings beside the Candle Dragon Lord raised their eyebrows slightly dissatisfied with Crimson Moon's attitude towards the Candle Dragon Lord. However, when they remembered that she was a king serving the Demon Emperor and was not loyal to the Candle Dragon Lord, they did not want to bicker with her. Seems like that old dog Lin Changsheng has really turned his old nest into a turtle shell. The Candle Dragon Lord snorted coldly as a cold light flashed in his eyes. He said, "The Demon Emperor should have informed you already. From now on, you will listen to my command and take down the Federation as soon as possible. Then, you will go and reinforce the Demon Emperor. Do you have any objections?" Fei Yu and the Radiant King looked at each other. The Radiant King smiled kindly and said, "The Demon Emperor has already informed us. We will assist you in taking down this giant demon federation." The Candle Dragon Lord nodded slightly and said, "If that's the case, come with me. To defeat the bandits, we must first capture their leader. Let the army restrain them from the front while we attack the enemy's rear and destroy them in one go." Fei Yu and the Radiant King nodded. They had no objections. In the border city at the rear of the Federation army, the core representatives of the four consortiums formed an alliance army. They were paying close attention to the battlefield and discussing countermeasures. Now, the four consortiums had become the main force of the war. Although they were suppressing the Empire's army, their shortcomings were also exposed. Every important operation would be discussed in a meeting and voted on. There was no unified voice in the meeting room. There would be different voices every time. Although the Terrace Financial Group's Leslity had received Lin Chongqing's authorization, it did not have much effect. Although the citizens of the Federation revered the god of technology, Lin Chongqing's words did not seem to have much value. When it came to personal profits and losses, Lin Chongqing's words did not carry much weight. Although Lin Chongqing tried to use his ability to control all the virtual instruments to deter the three consortiums, it was not very effective. After all, machines could not completely dominate the world. Otherwise, he would not need to care about the wishes of the three consortiums. It was precisely because of the internal discord that the transmission of orders on the battlefield was delayed. As a result, the countless remnants of the Empire's army that had been killed by the Peace Circle could still struggle at death's door. I suggest activating Blue Weapon and directly bombing the rear of the demon race to cut off their supplies. I think we should activate the creation god Mecha. With the power of the creation god Mecha, it is enough to flatten the demon race without losing our soldiers. I think the demon Mecha can be sent to the plains in the west. If we launch an assault there, we can deal a heavy blow to the demon race. In the meeting room, everyone was discussing and suggesting different military forces to be sent. The demon mecha of our Lokfei financial group is still in development. It is not stable to use it on the battlefield. Unless it is absolutely necessary, it is best not to use it. I suggest using missiles. How can we have so many missiles? Also, what if the missiles accidentally hurt our own troops? Stop arguing. Let's vote. The secretaries and the soldiers on duty beside the representatives at the round table silently watched these top-notch figures argue. They were a little impatient and wanted to make the decision for them. However, they knew that they were just insignificant people and did not have a right to make the decision. After the voting plan was decided, it was immediately sent to the front line. Just as they were about to vote on the next plan, they suddenly received an urgent report from the front line. The demon race's king has been mobilized. Request to send the creation god Mecha to participate in the battle. The entire meeting room was alarmed. This time, the decision was made extremely quickly. The same voice sounded. Aloud. Chapter 1180. While the command center was being slaughtered by Candle Dragon Lord and the others, more than a dozen creation god mechs whizzed over. Candle Dragon Lord and the others immediately abandoned the remaining generals in the camp and faced the creation god mechs that surrounded them. Fire! Candle Dragon Lord's entire body was demonized, and his scales expanded sharply. He turned into a fire dragon that was hundreds of meters long in midair, baring his fangs and brandishing his claws, which stunned countless soldiers below. At this moment, he took the initiative to rush toward a creation god mech. In front of his demonized giant dragon body, the 7 meters tall creation god mech was like a toy. He suddenly opened his mouth and swallowed one of them, chewing it. This brutal scene not only shocked the fleeing generals and ordinary soldiers below, but also made the other kings who were fighting with him change their expressions, especially Crimson Moon and Light King. They had personally fought with creation god mechs, so they had a deeper impression of them than other kings who had only read about them from the information. Apart from the slightly inferior operation, the performance of the creation god mechs was not inferior to a real king. Moreover, once a creation god mech self-destructs, the lethality would be enough to seriously injure a king. This was also the reason why the kings were unwilling to fight with a creation god mech. Be careful of its self-destruction. Light King immediately worried that Candle Dragon Lord would be injured. Candle Dragon Lord snorted coldly. Suddenly, his mouth bulged and he spat out a piece of black iron. Its surface was bumpy, and one could vaguely see that it was a long strip. In some places, it could be seen that it was the shoulder plate and laser tube of a creation god mech. However, no matter how one looked at this charred lump of iron, it was impossible to associate it with the dazzling creation god mech that was covered in gold. Light King's pupils shrank, and a trace of horror flashed in the depths of his eyes. Even if he attacked with all his strength, he could not destroy a creation god mech so easily. Moreover, looking at Candle Dragon Lord's appearance, it seemed to be effortless. Seeing this scene, Crimson Moon's eyes narrowed slightly. She clenched her fingers slightly, and the corners of her mouth slowly curled up into an imperceptible arc. She turned around and threw herself into the battle on the other side. She took the initiative to restrain a creation god mech and unleashed her dark domain. These iron lumps made by Old Dog Lin are really hard. They almost hurt my teeth. The scorched black lump of iron that Lord Torch Dragon spat out shot onto the ground like a meteorite, creating a huge pit and stirring up a large amount of dust. He moved his jaw and shook his head before turning around and pouncing toward another Genesis god mecha. At the same time, he swept his tail and knocked away the 5 Genesis god mechas that were surrounding him. 2 of the Genesis god mechas swung their high-frequency particle sabers at his flaming dragon tail. But as soon as the high-frequency particle sabers approached the flames on the tail, they melted like snow and were swept away. Lord Torch Dragon opened his mouth and swallowed another creation god mecha, chewing hard. Do you really think that I only have fire abilities? Old Dog Lin, these toys that you created can only bully these primitive people. Lord Torch Dragon's face was full of disdain as he moved skillfully in the encirclement of 7 or 8 Genesis god mechas. The particle weapons and special rays released by these Genesis god mechas were all easily blocked by him. The Fire Dragon Nation had long since investigated the Genesis god mechas in detail, and they were also aware of the Federation's many high-tech weapons. To him, as long as he knew the principles behind these weapons, he would be able to simulate them with his own body or evolve the corresponding restraining abilities. Moreover, he had reached the pinnacle of his fire ability. With his fire ability alone, he could crack hundreds of abilities and technologies. No matter how hard the Genesis god mechas were and how advanced their systems were, they all failed under the corrosion of the terrifying flames released from his body. Machines had a tolerance limit, and the high temperature he released had already exceeded the heat resistance limit of the Genesis god mechas. Far exceeded. In theory, he could make his body temperature rise infinitely, but once it exceeded a certain limit, he would also be affected. His consciousness would be burned and blurred by the flames, and his brain would stop thinking, living in a form similar to a thing. When that time came, his body would lose control, and his temperature would rise infinitely until his body couldn't bear it anymore. When it rose to a certain height, he would completely disappear from the world. This was his strongest trump card, his life-saving ability, and also the reason why the Demon Emperor didn't dare to touch him easily. So strong. The Snake King entangled the Genesis god mecha and was having a hard time fighting. The poison that he was good at was ineffective in front of the Genesis god mecha, and he could only rely on his own strength to fight, so the battle was a little difficult. When he sensed Lord Torch Dragon's battle on the other side, he couldn't help but be shocked. Although he had long known that Lord Torch Dragon was very strong and much stronger than kings like them, he didn't expect the gap to be so big. In the siege of 7 or 8 Genesis god mecha, Lord Torch Dragon kept swallowing one Genesis god mecha after another, spitting out pieces of iron lumps one after another. The number of Genesis god mecha present decreased rapidly. Is this the power of Demon Overlord? Light King was fighting fiercely with a Genesis god mecha while paying attention to Lord Torch Dragon. For him, if he used all his strength, he could instantly kill the Genesis god mecha in front of him, but he didn't need to expose his full strength at this time. Besides, he knew that even if he used all his strength, he could only deal with 2 or 3. It was far from Lord Torch Dragon, who regarded the Genesis god mecha as a toy. In less than 10 minutes, the number of Genesis god mecha present was reduced to 2 or 3. The pilots inside had lost the will to fight, so they turned around and ran away. However, they were quickly destroyed by Lord Torch Dragon's pursuit. Attack the city! Lord Torch Dragon roared at the sky and took the lead to swim into the city. Crimson Moon and the others followed closely behind. A large number of military Athena mecha, Dragon Knight mecha, and so on rushed out of the city. But in front of Lord Torch Dragon, their formation was directly broken and they were vulnerable. That night, the border city of the Federation was declared lost, and the Empire army entered on a large scale. The next day, under the leadership of Lord Torch Dragon and a group of kings, the Empire army occupied one big city after another. The Federation citizens inside were controlled by the invading Empire army. The ordinary civilians all disarmed and surrendered, and the Empire army took over the city defense. On the third day, the headquarters of the Milan Consortium, one of the 4 major consortiums, was destroyed by Lord Torch Dragon and surrendered. On the fourth day, the Terrace Consortium, the only one of the 4 major consortiums that was struggling to survive, was completely destroyed by Lord Torch Dragon and Crimson Moon and other kings. Blood flowed like a river in Premier City. The lake island in the city where the Terrace Consortium's headquarters was once worth tens of billions was razed to the ground. Countless scenic villas designed by famous teachers were destroyed. Only corpses were scattered all over the ground. The entire land was extremely desolate. On the 5th day, Lord Torch Dragon, Crimson Moon, and the others, accompanied by the top leaders of the military and business circles, led by the 3 major consortiums that surrendered, held a meeting to announce the occupation to all the citizens of the Federation. As for the reform and new name, Lord Torch Dragon did not do it. He would do it slowly in the future. After occupying the Federation, he completely cut off the resources of the host city and froze all the nuclear weapons of the other nearby cities. Chapter 1181. So they want to cut off Lin Chongqing's escape route. Dean saw Candle Dragon Lord and the others appear on the battlefield. No wonder they didn't counterattack immediately. They want to cut off Lin Chongqing's escape route and force him into a desperate situation. Although Lin Chongqing could freely traverse the virtual world, the mainframe was his foundation. In the virtual world, Lin Chongqing was the master, but many devices still needed humans to activate them. Many of the machines that could move autonomously and were controlled by Lin Chongqing could also be manually shut down, cut off from power, and be permanently frozen. This was Lin Chongqing's fatal weakness. At this moment, he had nowhere to hide in front of Candle Dragon Lord and the Demon Emperor. In the next few days, Candle Dragon Lord led Crimson Moon and the others to occupy the Federation. When the chairman's meeting was held, Dean knew that they were going to start to move against Lin Chongqing, and Lin Chongqing was bound to call him again. This time, it will be the last bloody battle. Dean's eyes flashed coldly. After a few days of epiphany, he used Lin Chongqing's memory to research and develop abilities. His strength was several times stronger than before, and he had a new understanding of himself. The only regret was that he didn't have time to hone many powerful abilities to the extreme. If he was given a few years, he was confident that no matter how many traps Lin Chongqing buried in the host city, he would be able to destroy them all. If others were to give him advice and choose a smart choice, he would retreat temporarily and stay dormant for a few years before coming out. But when he thought of the lonely figure wandering in the wilderness, he felt a dull pain in his heart. He had lost her and forgotten her. So how could he let her go now? Even if his life was in danger this time, he didn't want to retreat. Although Lin Chongsheng might be lying, but what if it was true? What if? They're coming. Dean suddenly noticed several dazzling heat sources approaching from the distant horizon. They didn't hide their heat sources. It should be Candle Dragon Lord and the others. This time, they might join forces with the Demon Emperor to attack. Dean frowned. Beep. The communicator suddenly lit up, and Lin Chongsheng's virtual figure appeared. You should have been waiting for this moment, right? You've been reading the news on your wristwatch for the past few days, so you should know about their actions. They've already frozen all the nuclear weapons in the Federation, and they can't be activated. Even I can't do it. This time, they're preparing to completely destroy the mainframe. I need your help. Dudian knew that he was aware of his behavior in the past few days, but it was limited to the tour records in the watch. There were no surveillance cameras around. Dudian didn't know that Dudian was developing a new ability. After all, they would have a battle sooner or later after solving the problem between the devil and the candle dragon. What do you want me to do? Dudian said indifferently. There was no change in his expression. Lin Chongsheng smiled and said, We agreed last time. This time, you will help me hold back either the Demon Emperor or Master Candle Dragon. Leave the rest to me. Once it's done, I will definitely tell you what you want. I won't go back on my word. Dean was silent for a moment. How can you guarantee it? Lin Chongsheng was startled. I guarantee with my reputation that I can give you a copy of my words. If I go back on my word, then you can spread it throughout the Federation. Dean's face became colder. Do you think this kind of thing can affect you? Lin Chongsheng frowned, sighed, and said, It still affects me. After all, I'm the Federation's god of science and technology. If I do something that goes back on my word, even if I manage to defeat the Demon Emperor and the others, how am I going to establish myself in the Federation in the future? I don't know how to promise you, since you don't believe me. After all, I don't have a body. My consciousness is in the virtual world. Nothing can threaten me except the mainframe. But I can't tell you about the mainframe. It's tantamount to suicide. Dean indifferently said, I don't need you to tell me about the mainframe. I know a little bit about it from the memory I plundered. If you break your promise, then I won't help you again. In addition, I need you to prepare a top mecha for me. I can fully display the performance of the mecha with my ability. Lin Chongsheng smiled bitterly and said, I don't have any mecha here. They have already built up this place and can't transport anything here. If they weren't in a hurry to destroy me, they would only need to hold on for a few more years. When the energy here is exhausted, I will naturally die without fighting. Dean saw that he couldn't extort any benefits, so he was too lazy to talk with him. Okay, I will go. Then he crushed the watch. Even now, he's still testing me. It seems like he really doesn't know what's in the memories that I've devoured. There might be a big secret of his, but it's a pity that it's not in the memories. Dean tore off the watch and threw it to the side. He was ready to help Lin Chongsheng after the Demon Emperor and the others attacked. He didn't believe that Lin Chongsheng wouldn't be able to hold on for a few minutes. It's better to restrain the Candle Dragon Lord. The Demon Emperor alone reigns supreme over the Empire, so he should be stronger than the Candle Dragon Lord. It's better to leave the difficult bone to him. I don't know what he plans to do. Is he going to rely on that undead? Dean stood in the same place and fell in a deep thought. He felt that Lin Chongsheng was hiding something. He knows that the hatred between us can't be resolved. My killing intent towards him isn't inferior to that of the Demon Emperor. I'll help him this time. If he breaks the contract, then I can join forces with the Demon Emperor and the others to force him to abdicate. So, he will either fulfill the agreement and tell me the way to deal with the undead, or he has other preparations that can break the alliance between me and the Demon Emperor. However, the possibility of the second is very low. He can't deal with the Demon Emperor and the others alone. If he can deal with them, he won't need to beg me now. Thinking about it, the possibility of him knowing the way to deal with the undead is quite high. Calculating this point, Dean's heart slightly heated up and his eyes brightened up a bit. At this time, Dean saw the blazing heat sources disappear on the ground in the distance. He stayed for half a minute before quickly approaching. He observed from a distance and saw that there were no signs of human habitation on the land of the underground base. He suddenly smelled 10 different body odors in the air, one of which he was very familiar with. His pupils narrowed, and a strong killing intent flashed through his eyes. Crimson Moon. Dean remembered her body odor. When he fell into her hands, it was better to die than to live. Her body odor was still fresh in his memory. His nose was more sensitive than a hound. He wouldn't forget anything he smelled, let alone Crimson Moon, who left a deep impression on him. It seems that they're all here. There were only 3 heat sources I saw before. The others should have habitually hidden their body heat sources, but didn't eliminate their body odor. Dudian thought. Hiding the source of heat was a veteran hunter's habitual instinct. It could make the enemy unable to distinguish their specific strength. As for the smell, it was not necessary for Crimson Moon and the others to eliminate it here. In any case, Lin Chongqing knew their whereabouts from the moment they entered the city. Since Crimson Moon is here, the Demon Emperor must also be here. They really joined forces. Dean looked at the ground under his feet. Suddenly, he felt a slight tremor. He immediately bent down to listen. Although the material of the underground base was extraordinary, there was still a faint sound coming out. He heard the sound of fierce fighting and impact. It seemed that something had hit the dome, and the soil on the ground was shaking slightly. Dean stood up. His eyes flashed. He felt that it was a pity. If his X-ray vision could penetrate the material of the underground base and see the situation inside, he would be able to accurately find the time to enter. Chapter 1182. On the second floor of the underground base, a virtual projection was projected on the ground. Lin Chongqing was standing in front of the Demon Emperor and Candle Dragon Lord with a smile on his face. He only had eyes for the Demon Emperor and Candle Dragon Lord. As for the other kings behind them, they were like air to him. There was not the slightest hint of tension on him, and he was still talking and laughing with a smile on his face. His voice was also very gentle as he said, "Demon Emperor, Candle Dragon Master, now that the hundreds of millions of people in the Federation have fallen into your hands, you have already gotten what you deserve. Do you really want to continue fighting with me?" Candle Dragon Lord originally wanted to attack the Federation's mainframe behind Lin Chongqing. Seeing that Lin Chongqing had appeared and said this, he couldn't help but sneer. What's the use of humans? If we really want to create humans, do we still need people like you? The most worthless thing in this world is humans. We need to eliminate the roots when we cut the grass. We don't want to fight with you, but we also don't want to keep you alive to take revenge on us in the future. Lin Chongqing smiled. You cut off my energy and turned this city into a dead city. After a few years, what can I use to fight with you? But now, it's still a little difficult for you to completely destroy me. Even if I can't drag you to death with me, I can at least make you suffer a lot. And the people behind you probably won't be able to leave this place alive. Hearing this, the Snake King and the other 2 kings behind the Demon Emperor and Candle Dragon Lord changed their expression slightly. A trace of fear flashed in their eyes as they looked around vigilantly. Fei Yu, on the other hand, looked indifferent, and the corner of her mouth slightly curled up into a disdainful smile. The Light King, who was beside her, smiled as if he didn't hear the threat in her words. He maintained the same posture and expression from beginning to end. The Demon Emperor said indifferently, "This meeting is a moment that will be recorded in the history books. It seems that the 3 of us have never really met before. Unfortunately, meeting is also the time to part. You are the first-generation divine fetus from more than 200 years ago and have lived in the virtual world for more than 200 years. What you have seen and heard is far from what we can compare. Even if we live for another 1,000 years, what we have experienced may not be as much as what you have seen in 1 year. In other words, you have reached the level of God. You only lack a perfect divine body. When you find a perfect divine body, perhaps no one in this world will be your opponent. I don't think we want to see this result, so don't make things difficult for us. Lin Chongqing's eyebrows twitched a few times as he thought of Dean's figure. He gritted his teeth in hatred. Not only did he hate Dean's tricks, which made him underestimate the enemy, but he also hated the fact that Dean had promised to help him. However, Dean hadn't appeared yet. Lin Chongqing could guess that Dean wanted him to suffer more. What a vengeful brat. Although he was angry, his expression did not change at all. With a smile on his face, he said calmly, "In my opinion, the two of you are worrying too much. The two of you should know very well how rare a godly fetus is. It is not that easy to get one. Moreover, the methods to cultivate a godly fetus are all in the hands of those old things. We're just test subjects." Master Candle Dragon slightly raised his head and sneered. "What if those old things create new test subjects and you obtain them? They don't live on Earth for long and are far away from us. They don't know the situation here as well as you and I. If they knew, do you think you can still live in this virtual world?" Hearing his words, the kings behind him looked at each other in astonishment. They felt as if they had come into contact with a big secret, as if a corner of the world had been opened to them. Godly fetus? God? When Fei Yu heard these words, her eyes slightly narrowed. There was a trace of hidden greed in her eyes as she looked at Lin Chongqing. She didn't notice that the eyes of the Light King, who was next to her, also flickered a few times when he heard these words. Just as Lin Chongqing was about to reply to Master Candle Dragon, the Demon Emperor suddenly said coldly, "It is useless to say more. If you have any backup plans, take them all out. I believe you have been preparing for today's battle. With your calculation ability, you should have simulated all the situations of today's battle. No matter what kind of accident might occur, you might have calculated it. I wonder if you have calculated how to deal with it?" Lin Chongqing frowned slightly. Just as he was about to speak again, the Demon Emperor suddenly raised his hand and threw out a black light beam. It was unclear how the black light was released, but it was like an energy ball that directly penetrated the chest of Lin Chongqing's projection and smashed into a huge demon that was entrenched on the ground behind him. This was a demon covered in tentacles that looked like sarcomas. It was the demon body of one of the kings that had been left here earlier. When the dark energy ball hit the demon body, there was no sound. Like melting ice, it pierced a hole through the demon body. "Go!" Master Candle Dragon was too lazy to talk with Lin Chongqing as he saw that the Demon Emperor had already made a move. He led the kings to rush forward. Lin Chongqing's face slightly changed. He was angry in his heart. He wanted to use words to delay the time. He knew that Dean couldn't see the situation inside the base. Maybe he would come down after a while, but he didn't expect to fight. Damn, is he really not coming? Lin Chongqing couldn't help but look at the ground above his head. There was no surveillance near the base. He couldn't see the situation outside the base because of the nuclear bomb. Unless Dean's body was integrated into the base, he wouldn't be able to sense it. Roar! The undead that was standing proudly in front of the mainframe roared and led several corpses to rush forward to meet Master Candle Dragon, the Demon Emperor, and the others. Lin Chongqing stood in the middle of the battlefield and watched them fight fiercely. Occasionally, his virtual projection would bump into him. He looked like a person who was standing in the middle of the battlefield and had nothing to do. Damn! Lin Chongqing's face turned ugly as he saw the undead being restrained by Master Candle Dragon and a young female king. Although the strength of the other kings' demonic bodies had become incomparably violent after turning into corpses, they had lost their rationality and weren't flexible enough to fight. Moreover, the Demon Emperor was leading the Light King and the other kings. Soon, two kings' demonic bodies were torn to pieces. They were completely unable to move. Go and destroy the mainframe. The Demon Emperor's body still maintained the appearance of a human, but his body was surging with dark energy. It was as if a special energy was attached to the skin of his hands and feet. The punches and kicks caused terrifying damage to the king's demonic bodies. The Demon Emperor called the Light King after repelling the king's demonic body. He told the Light King to attack the mainframe in front of him. The Light King's eyes slightly changed, but he didn't hesitate. He nodded and rushed over. Chapter 1183. Bang! The seemingly seamless metal wall behind the mainframe suddenly opened up. It was pitch black inside, but suddenly a ray of light appeared. The light was so dark that it was even deeper than the darkness in the cave. The moment the metal wall opened up, it rushed out and went straight towards the Light King who was attacking the mainframe. The Radiant King's pupils shrank as he instinctively felt an indescribable, dangerous aura. He was horrified and hurriedly retreated, but that black shadow closed in the blink of an eye. It was even faster than the Radiant King, who was known for his speed, like a black lightning. With a bang, the Radiant King's retreating body flew back at an even faster speed. Fresh blood sprayed into the air, and with a bang, he crashed into the metal wall on the other side of a few thousand meters away, causing the entire underground base to tremble. The Candle Dragon Master, who was restraining the horrifying zombie, also noticed this. His expression changed slightly. Although he expected Lin Changsheng to have something up his sleeves, he did not expect it to be true, and it was so powerful. The Demon Lord did not look at the Light King, who was sent flying. Instead, he squinted his eyes and looked at the black shadow. It looked like a human, but it was not a human. Its lower body was like a spider with 7 to 8 strange legs. On its back were 2 pairs of black, scythe-like wings. There was a blood-red eye on its forehead that was filled with a violent aura. The pores on its body were filled with a murderous and bloody aura. It was like a demon that crawled out from the sea of blood. Origami. A chill flashed in the Demon Lord's eyes as the dark energy around him fluctuated. Origami. The Candle Dragon Master on the other side frowned. He felt that something was wrong. This thing did not seem to be a pure origami. There was an indescribable, evil aura around it. Can the two of you have a good talk now? The projection of Lin Changsheng, who was in the middle of the battlefield, spoke. He pretended to sigh and said, "Although you have frozen the nuclear weapon to prevent me from dying with you, but with it here, if the two of you really want to fight to the end, I can at least drag one of you down with me. Do you believe me?" The Candle Dragon Master forced the horrifying zombie to retreat. The zombie seemed to have received an order and did not pursue him. "This is your trump card? A modified origami?" As he spoke, the Candle Dragon Master glanced at the Demon Lord, who was not far away. The Demon Emperor said indifferently, "A corpse isn't qualified to negotiate." With that said, he attacked again. Lin Changsheng's expression changed. He had wanted to use this opportunity to stall for time, but he didn't expect that the Demon Emperor would notice something or have other thoughts. He would interrupt his plans every time, as if he had steeled his heart to kill him. Anger rose in his heart. With a cold snort, he quickly passed down the order. Roar! The demon-like origami let out a roar as its 3 eyes turned red. It took the initiative to charge towards the Demon Emperor. The Demon Emperor snorted coldly. The clothes on his back suddenly split open, and a large number of sinister arms stretched out. It was as if his back was an Azura hell, and countless evil spirits were crawling out from it. As soon as these arms stretched out, they grabbed at the origami. Each of the arms was covered in a special dark energy. The arms were extremely long, and as soon as they touched the origami, the flesh and blood of the origami were corroded. The origami roared towards the sky. Suddenly, its body softened like mucus. Then, countless sharp blades extended out from the mucus and shot towards the Demon Emperor. Some of the mucus was used as a shield to block the countless arms from the Demon Emperor's back. In addition, some of the mucus was used as a nozzle to shoot poisonous bullets at the Demon Emperor's arms and thighs, corroding them like acid. The Demon Emperor let out a low roar. Its body also turned into a puddle of black mucus. From the mucus, swords, claws, shields, axes, and other objects were formed. The Demon Emperor was locked in a stalemate with the mucus transformed from the origami. Behind the Demon Emperor, Fei Yu's eyes flickered when she saw this scene. The other kings might have a hard time understanding this strange battle, but she knew that this was a battle of life and death. There was no specific form, no specific means. Everything could be created at will, and the body could be transformed. This kind of battle had broken the conventional limits of human thinking. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a battle of gods. This was the level of life that she had dreamed of, and it was also the level of life that she had reached. However, after reaching this level, she realized that there were differences between humans and gods. On the other side, Master Candle Dragon, who was holding back the horrifying zombies, was observing the battle between the Demon Emperor and the Aragami. However, he was not in a hurry to help the Demon Emperor. This was a rare opportunity to understand the details of the Demon Emperor. After Lin Changsheng was dealt with, it would be the war between the Fire Dragon country and the Empire. At that time, it would be even more tragic. There could only be one king in this world, because there was only one king, and that was why he was respected. The speed of life reconstruction is too fast, a little faster than me. Master Candle Dragon became more and more serious as he watched. At his level, he knew how difficult it was to continue to improve his combat power. Abilities and demonic insects were no longer important to them. What was important was the control of their own bodies. At this moment, when the Demon Emperor's body was formed into various kinds of sharp blades or axes, the speed was extremely fast and almost instantaneously. In this kind of battle, even if one was faster by only 1,000th of a second, he would still be able to attack first and win. Suddenly, Master Candle Dragon noticed that when the Aragami reconstructed its limbs, its speed was even faster than the Demon Emperor's. After dozens of sharp blades shot out from the mucus, when the Demon Emperor turned into a sword and shield to parry, the sharp blades suddenly split into spikes and transformed into a mace-like weapon. It violently smashed onto the sword and shield, shattering the sword and shield that were the perfect counter to the sharp swords. This caused the Demon Emperor to have to reconstruct new armor to deal with it, and for a moment, he felt that it was difficult to parry. How is this possible? Is this a living Aragami? Master Candle Dragon widened his eyes in disbelief. While he was still in shock, the horrifying zombie beside him seized the opportunity and bit on his shoulder, tearing off a piece of flesh. When he came back to his senses, his shoulder quickly burned into flames. All the cells were turned into fat, burning together with the virus that invaded his body. The virus infection of the latter had no effect on him. Unless he wanted to die, it was almost impossible for him to be infected. If it were other kings, it would not be so easy to deal with this horrifying zombie. Even if they could cut off their limbs, shed their skin, and shed their shells, it would still take time. Moreover, they cannot cut off their limbs, shed their skin, and shed their shells endlessly. We can't drag this any longer. Go and destroy the host. Seeing that the Demon Emperor was at a disadvantage, Master Candle Dragon did not want to drag this any longer. Otherwise, he would have to expose his trump card. So he immediately said to Fei Yu, who was beside him. Fei Yu slightly pouted and said, "I'm not going." Master Candle Dragon's eyes widened in anger. He did not expect that a king would dare to disobey him. Fei Yu was not afraid at all. She left without a care and turned to help the injured Radiant King attack the other King Devil Body, leaving this horrifying zombie to Master Candle Dragon alone. Master Candle Dragon was so angry that he almost went berserk. However, he managed to control his anger in the end. He had thought that this new king trained by the Demon Emperor was obedient, but he did not expect that he would make such a move at this critical moment. Unfortunately, he could not get away to pursue this matter. Otherwise, his alliance with the Demon Emperor would definitely be torn apart, and the one to benefit would be Lin Changsheng. At this moment, another aura appeared above everyone's head. The Demon Emperor, Master Candle Dragon, and the other kings were all shocked. Could it be that Lin Changsheng still had a terrifying trump card? But soon, Master Candle Dragon felt that this aura was very familiar. He immediately remembered that it was the Federation King from last time. He secretly heaved a sigh of relief. A mere king would not be able to affect the overall situation. Fei Yu released her senses and suddenly felt that this aura was a little familiar. Soon, she suddenly remembered the identity of the newcomer. She was startled for a moment, but her eyes immediately lit up. She immediately abandoned the king devil body in front of her and rushed to the first floor of the underground base. "Where are you going?" Radiant King hurriedly shouted. Chapter 1184. As soon as Dean entered the first floor of the underground base, he felt several powerful auras emitting from the second floor of the base from the hole in the ground in front of him. His perception quickly spread along the hole. Before he had time to see the specific situation of the second floor, he felt a familiar aura rushing toward the hole. It seemed to go straight to the first floor of the base. Crimson Moon. Dean was startled, and his eyes instantly turned cold. Whoosh! A beautiful figure floated out of the hole and landed gracefully on the ground. It was Crimson Moon. She didn't release her demonic form at the moment, but she looked beautiful and moving. However, compared to when Dean first met her, she lacked the tenderness of a young girl and had more of a cold and elegant, domineering aura. "You're still alive." Crimson Moon looked up and down at Dean, and her eyes were full of surprise. She knew that Dean was seriously injured. She thought he was a failure and abandoned by her. She didn't expect him to be secretly taken away by Dean's accomplices. When she reacted, he had already left the giant wall of Sylvia. Although she was a little angry, she didn't bother to chase him because she knew that this man wouldn't live long without a heart. But now, Dean was standing in front of her, and the aura and energy field he exuded were not inferior to other kings she had met. In addition, when they came here, Candle Dragon Lord told them that Lin Changsheng had also cultivated a more difficult king. She didn't expect that this person was Dean. "Your experiment seems to be successful." Dean looked at her coldly and suddenly sneered. "Unfortunately, you have struggled for so long, but you still returned to the Demon Emperor and became his dog." Crimson Moon frowned slightly, but soon stretched out and said, "I didn't expect you to secretly run to this foreign country. What method did Lin Changsheng use to let you live until now?" "Do you think I will tell you?" Dean sneered. Crimson Moon's eyes flashed. Suddenly, her arms shook and turned into two curved blades, rushing toward Dean. "Since you don't want to tell me, then go to hell." Dean didn't expect her to suddenly attack, but he was already prepared for it. The blood all over his body surged, and his arms also turned into two splitting blades, meeting Crimson Moon head-on. With a bang, the four blades crossed each other, and Crimson Moon's two machete arms were immediately cut, but they didn't break. Even so, Crimson Moon was shocked, and she quickly pulled away. Dean immediately took advantage of the victory to chase. Several sharp blades shot out from his chest and shoulders, chasing after Crimson Moon like a venomous snake. A trace of anger flashed across Crimson Moon's face. Suddenly, a large amount of black mist erupted from her pores and enveloped her whole body. The black mist spread in all directions and formed a dark domain. Dean's line of sight also instantly lost sight of Crimson Moon. Several sharp blades pierced through, but they hit nothing but air. Dean's eyes flashed, and he immediately switched to the ability of the Sun Beast. Suddenly, he saw Crimson Moon. "After so long, I didn't expect you to have improved to this level." Suddenly, Crimson Moon's voice floated from behind Dean like a ghost. Dean didn't look back. He could see 360 degrees without any blind spots. Behind him was still the black mist, and he couldn't see Crimson Moon's figure. It seemed that the darkness was her body. "However, it's impossible to kill me with this little strength." Crimson Moon's voice was very leisurely, as if she was not in a hurry to fight. She suddenly said, "I'll give you a chance. Do you want to cooperate with me?" "Cooperate?" Dean was startled. He quickly restrained his thoughts and looked around vigilantly, so as not to be distracted. "Don't worry, you're already in my dark realm. It's easy for me to kill you. I'm not deliberately disturbing your mind." Crimson Moon seemed to see through Dean's thoughts and sneered softly. Dean's eyes were deep, but he didn't comment. He suddenly thought of Crimson Moon's words. She only had the whole world in her heart, and her goal was to become a god and rule all life. However, she was now subservient to the demon emperor. Most likely, she was unwilling. At this moment, she wanted to talk to him about cooperation. Presumably, she had ulterior motives and wanted to take advantage of the chaos to rebel. If that was the case, there was indeed a bit of a possibility. How do we cooperate? Dean asked. Crimson Moon let out a light laugh and said, Do you know who is ruling this world? Dean said in his heart, the Empire's demon emperor, the Federation's immortal Lin, and the 2 dragon lords of the Fire Dragon country. As far as I know, it's the 4 of them who divided the surviving humans. Suddenly, Crimson Moon's figure appeared more than 10 meters in front of Dean. Her skin was abnormally snow-white and seemed to emit light in the darkness. Even the lustrous pores on her body could be seen clearly. There was a slightly arrogant smile on her face. She said, You're half right. The human countries are indeed controlled by the 4 of them. As for the snow apes and the endless sea monsters in the north, they're just scattered sand, nothing to worry about. Dean's heart slightly moved. He had heard about the snow apes in the north. It seemed to be a country formed by the undeads who had given birth to consciousness. And the endless sea monsters should be the most powerful force on Earth. However, the area of the ocean was too large. The sea monsters lived in the ocean and fought with each other. They simply didn't care about the creatures on land. Just like how they fought for the throne on land, they didn't care about the monsters in the ocean. The 4 of them, in the end, are just spokespersons. Crimson Moon slowly opened her mouth, but her words were shocking, causing Dean to hold his breath. You're from the old era. You've personally experienced the Doomsday disaster. You should also know what the root cause of the disaster is. Crimson Moon said with a faint smile, Although humans finally launched the nuclear annihilation plan, the demonic insects weren't completely wiped out. Moreover, the demonic insects' infiltration into humans at that time was much deeper than you think. As early as the nuclear annihilation plan was launched, they already knew in advance. However, they didn't achieve their goal. They were greedy and hesitant. They didn't evacuate in time, leading to the destruction of most of the demonic insects. However, the great sages among the demonic insects left Earth with the surviving demonic insects. Great sages? Dean was startled. Crimson Moon said with a smile, They're equivalent to the leaders of the demonic insects, the wise ones who led the demonic insects to survive. How do you know? Otherwise, do you think I didn't do anything when I became the king? Crimson Moon asked. Dean understood and no longer questioned. However, the remaining demonic insects on Earth didn't completely die out. Some demonic insects passed on the situation on Earth, which was received by the great sages who escaped from Earth. Therefore, they once again returned to Earth. Chapter 1185. Dean frowned slightly, but he was not too surprised. Burrow had told him about the secrets of the kings a long time ago. Last time when he helped Lin Chongsheng to defeat the kings, he also saw the demonic insects that came out of their bodies. These demonic insects parasitized in the brains of the kings and interfered with their thoughts. However, the main thinking of the kings was still their own consciousness, which also caused the kings to fight against each other. He thought that the ability of the demonic insects was limited, but he did not expect that the demonic insects were still controlling the kings. You just mentioned the Troll Federation and the Fire Dragon country, but you did not mention the Empire. Did you omit them? Dean looked at her. Crimson Moon smiled and said, The Empire is different from the Federation and the Fire Dragon country. As you can see, the Empire has a natural giant wall. It seems to be artificially made, but it is a coincidence. This is not the technology of the demonic insects, nor is it the technology of humans, but the technology of the origami. Dean was shocked, and his eyes suddenly became clear. The Empire is controlled by the origami? So every giant wall is guarded by the remains of the origami? Rather than guarding, it is better to say that it is a memorial. Crimson Moon smiled faintly and said, Every giant wall is a graveyard for the origami, but it is also a prison for the experimental subjects. Otherwise, with the demon insects' fear and hatred towards the origami, Why would they keep their corpses and turn them into our human religion? Dean's face changed slightly. The experimental subject she mentioned was obviously referring to human beings. He suddenly thought of the technology that was blocked in the giant wall of Sylvia. In other giant walls, the technology was not high. After 300 years of development, even if there was no complete inheritance of the old technology, humans would not still be in the ignorant medieval era. The Empire blocked the technology of the giant wall. He knew it when he ascended to the position of the Wall Lord, but he did not know the purpose. It was obvious that the border needed to be defended against strong enemies, but the development of technology in their territory was restricted. In his opinion, it was very contradictory. Now he finally got the answer. Humans were the experimental subjects. No wonder humans were not allowed to master technology. Wait, you said that the Empire is controlled by the Aragami, so doesn't it mean that the Demon Emperor listens to the Aragami? The Federation and the Fire Dragon country should know about this. Is your alliance a conspiracy, and the real target is the Demon Emperor? Dean's hair stood up as he thought of this. Was this a trap for the Devil Emperor? Crimson Moon saw the surprised look on Dean's face and giggled. You are so cute. What kind of person is the Devil Emperor? How could he not know each other's identity? Even I know about this. So how could I hide it from him? I haven't told you yet. There are wars between the devil insects. For example, the flame soul insect you saw were split from the supreme flame devil insects. Dadian was startled. There is a war between the insects. Demonic insects are our unified name for them. Actually, demonic insects are divided into two species, frigid demonic insects and flaming demonic insects. One is hot while the other is cold. With opposite natures, they're natural enemies and hate each other. The war between them is even longer than the history of thousands of years among Hua people. Crimson Moon's lips curled into a smile as she slowly explained. The environment of the planet where the demon insects live is extremely harsh, and the demon insects are all born in natural demon dens. The planet's environment is extremely extreme, with half of the planet being hot and cold, causing the physiques of the two species of demon insects to evolve further and further away from each other, causing the hatred between them to grow deeper and deeper. However, it is because of the extremes that they have reached the pinnacle. The faint ridicule in Crimson Moon's eyes slowly disappeared, and she said, You have obtained the ice worm, so you should be able to see how tenacious its vitality is. Even in an oxygen-free and lightless environment, it can survive and reproduce. It is simply a super virus. In addition to their strong survival ability, the lifespan of the demon insects is also beyond your imagination. Ordinary demon insects can live for more than 1,000 years, and the stronger ones can even live for 3,000 years. And the great sages of the demon insects are all existences of this level. You can imagine what kind of terrifying intelligence and combat power a life that has lived for 3,000 years can evolve into. Dean was stunned. Although he felt that his ability to accept was very strong, he was still shocked by Crimson Moon's words. Live for more than 1,000 years? That was more than 10 times the lifespan of a human. However, when he thought about some of the long-lived creatures on Earth, he quickly felt relieved. Not to mention the almost immortal lighthouse jellyfish. Even small creatures like turtles and sea toads could live for hundreds of years. With the ability and special characteristics of the ice worm, it was not surprising for them to live for thousands of years. Their physique was extremely cold, and they aged slowly. Even if Crimson Moon said that they could freeze themselves into ice and survive for thousands of years, he would still believe it. Although the demon insects have a long lifespan, very few of them can live to the point where they die of old age. Crimson Moon said, The environment of the demon insect planet is very harsh. Even if most of the demon insects do not fight with the hostile demon insects, they will be strangled by the environment or hunted by the Aragami. Therefore, they will travel across the stars, looking for a new suitable place to live, and then they found our Earth. Dean was stunned for a moment, and he asked, Hunted by the Aragami? Could it be that the origami also live on their planet? Of course not. Crimson Moon said, to the origami, the demon insects are just their food, and the planet that the origami live on is not far from the demon insect planet. The demon insects are like the poultry that the origami raise. Poultry? Dean was a little shocked. He did not expect the relationship between the demon insects and the origami to be like this. No wonder the demon insects are afraid of the origami. The origami are all gluttons, like a bottomless pit. They will devour all the resources around them, including stones, weeds, and water. Crimson Moon said slowly, therefore, the origami planet is very barren. Almost the entire planet has been devoured. However, the origami are even more terrifying than the demon insects. They can use their bodies to travel in the vacuum of the universe. Countless rays and the absolute zero temperature in the universe cannot kill them. Dean was startled. He felt like he was listening to a fairy tale. Crimson Moon saw that Dean did not seem to believe her. She chuckled and said, don't think that it is very difficult. When you reach the strength of the Demon Emperor, you will be able to do it too. For example, the Arctic demon insects and the flaming demon insects can survive in the universe for a short period of time. They can build a life reactor inside their body so that they will not be completely frozen and stop thinking. Dean could not help but frown when he saw her relaxed face. He asked, these things, where do you know these things? Do all the kings know these things? Did you forget my ability? Crimson Moon looked at him with a teasing smile. Do you want to recall it again? Dean snorted and said, your words are full of loopholes. Since the origami controls the empire, with the origami suppressing the demon insects, how can they allow the Federation and the Fire Dragon Country to exist? You said that the Federation and the Fire Dragon Country are controlled by the demon insects. Then the Fire Dragon Country is naturally controlled by the flaming demon insects, and the Federation is controlled by the Arctic demon insects. Then why is the Federation forbidden to use the demon insects to modify the body? Why did they choose to use the human technology? Crimson Moon said indifferently, what I said is true. Maybe there is something you can't understand, but there may be other secrets. In any case, I did not lie to you. The reason why I told you this is to let you know my sincerity. If you want to cooperate with me after the matter is done, I will tell you about the virus. Don't you want to know the root of this virus? Dean's pupils slightly shrank, but soon returned to normal. His heart was slightly shaken. The root of the virus? If he knew the root of the virus, did it mean that there was hope to find a way to crack it? If he could crack it, could he cure her? Seeing that Dean seemed to be moved, Crimson Moon smiled lightly and said, now that the situation is in a stalemate, in my opinion, that old boy Lin Changsheng has already played all his cards. The only last resort may be to explode the host in a futile attempt to perish together with us. But he will not use this step unless he is desperate. I hope you can help me get the host. Dean's eyes moved. He said, what do you want the host for? To control the Federation? You don't need to worry about this. Crimson Moon said indifferently. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.